Chapter 2881, 2881 Escape. Chapter 2881, 2881 Escape. 2881 Escape. Xin Qihu gave chase. Killing intent shot out of his eyes and materialized, and his entire body exuded a terrifying aura. The sky and earth around him collapsed piece by piece, and his power was so strong that he had reached the 5th tier. A single move from him could make heaven and earth pale in color. Such an existence was truly disrupting the balance of heaven and earth. No wonder he was hated by heaven and earth. However, the heaven and earth here was already dead, and it was impossible to restrict him at all, allowing Xin Qihu to unleash his full battle prowess. His speed was higher than Ling Han's, and he caught up to Ling Han not long afterwards. Ling Han used the same trick and swiped out the saber again, slashing towards Xin Qihu. This time, Xin Qihu was prepared. He took out a long silver staff and struck it toward the saber chi. Boom! The saber chi was shattered, turning into fragments that filled the sky. A murderous aura surged, and it still possessed terrifying destructive power. Xin Qihu did not dare to force his way through. What he was afraid of was not the power attack from the broken saber, but the terrifying murderous aura that could materialize and cause damage to his body. However, the name of greatest prodigy of all eternity was not just for show. He did not force his way through. Instead, he threw a punch that landed on the shattered afterimages, causing blood to appear on his fist again. Ling Han saw this, but he did not feel the slightest bit of happiness. This was because Xin Qihu knew that because he had always been wary of the saber chi, he would only continue to be blocked. He wanted to change this result by trying to use the power of his fists to destroy the murderous aura. If it were Ling Han, he would also do the same and take the initiative to adapt to this murderous aura. After all, it had already been dispersed by the precious tool, and its lethality could not be compared. However, Ling Han could not do anything. He could only flee. There was a hint of a smile at the corners of his mouth. Being pursued by the greatest prodigy of all eternity, like Xin Qihu, brought enormous pressure. Perhaps it could help him advance to the peak of the 2nd tier, and advance into the 3rd tier from there. This was also an opportunity for Ling Han, and opportunity always coexisted with danger. One was fleeing, and the other was chasing. Every time Xin Qihu caught up, Ling Han would use his broken saber to attack, buying himself time and space to escape again. 10 days, a month, and half a year passed. Time continued to pass, but the two prodigies were still embroiled in a pursuit. Ling Han felt that the power in his body was becoming purer and purer, and he had a feeling that he was about to sublimate. As for Xin Qihu, he adapted to the murderous aura better and better, and it was very likely that he would cross this threshold. Ling Han, how much longer can you run? Xin Qihu sneered. He believed that he would be able to truly adapt to the threat of that murderous aura in at most 3 days. At that time, Ling Han would no longer have any way to stop him. None of the people that Xin Qihu wanted to kill could ever escape. Ling Han did not reply. He still had one last move. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye as Xin Qihu gave chase. When Ling Han swung his saber again, the former let out a cold laugh. A wave of his staff shattered the saber chi, and his entire body continued to charge forward, charging into the vast expanse of shattered saber afterimages. Xin Qihu still couldn't face the saber chi head-on, but after shattering it, he was no longer afraid. Shio! Xin Qihu charged over, and he struck towards Ling Han with the sweep of his staff. Take a hit from me too. This staff strike was too terrifying. It was as if the entire dimension was pressing down on Ling Han, and it could destroy everything. If Xin Qihu was placed in a medium-level dimension, his attack would indeed be this powerful. The battle prowess of 5th tier was comparable to the eruption of a medium-level dimension. It was impossible for Ling Han to block it. The difference in battle prowess between the two of them was truly too great. He no longer hesitated. With a thought, Shio, his figure suddenly disappeared. Boom! Xin Qihu's staff instantly missed its target. What in the world was going on? Xin Qihu stopped, and a look of surprise appeared on his face. If Ling Han had torn open space to escape, then the former would have been able to sense it. However, although this was a dimension, it was a dead dimension. There were no regulations at all, and it was located in the void. How are you going to break through space in the void? How could there be space for you to break through? He broke through the void and returned to this dimension? Xin Qihu murmured. But this wasn't right either. Without the dimension coordinates, he should have had no idea how to get out. Strange. How did this brat disappear into thin air? Xin Qihu stood there for a long time before turning to leave. He would definitely find Ling Han again, and at that time, he would not give him any chance to escape. He would insta-kill him with one strike, and he did not mind even if it was a sneak attack. At his level, would he still care about others' opinions? Ling Han had, of course, used the endless powers of dimension in his body as a guide, and directly returned to the dimension. Others might not be able to do it, but he was different. He could travel freely in the Genesis world. This was naturally not the Flaming Frost Realm, but a low-level dimension. Sensing the terrifying power in his body, heaven and earth reacted instantly, sending down layers of heavenly tribulation to obliterate him. Of course, this was a waste of effort. Ling Han did not pay it any mind either. He frowned slightly. Xin Qihu was really quite shameless. He was clearly the greatest prodigy of all eternity, yet he did not even dare to fight him at the same cultivation level. Therefore, not only was Xin Qihu a prodigy, but he was also an ambitious and ruthless person. He only wanted results and did not care about the process. He only wanted Ling Han dead, and it didn't matter what method he used to kill him. Ling Han scratched his head. Even if he advanced into the third tier, he would probably only be on par with the other party. In fact, he would still be slightly inferior. Only if they were both in the fourth tier would he have enough confidence to suppress the other party. It couldn't be helped. Xin Qihu himself was a peerless, freakish genius. How could he be taken lightly? If I get a few more great herbs, I'll have the confidence to break through to the third tier, Ling Han muttered. Although advancing to the third tier would not allow him to suppress Xin Qihu, at least he would be able to oppose him then. With a thought, he tore open space and headed toward the mysterious dimension in the void again. However, while it was easy to come out, it wasn't easy to go back, because that dimension didn't have coordinates. Ling Han entered the void, and then followed his memories as he headed in that direction. His speed was great, but there was only an endless energy storm in the void, and the scenery didn't change at all. Even if he walked for 100 or 1,000 years, it was as if he was just circling endlessly. Soon, I'm almost there, Ling Han said to himself. After walking for more than 10 years, he finally had a feeling that the lost primitive dimension was not far away. But right at this moment, an indescribable palpitation arose in his heart. Before he could react, a black whip lashed toward him. How could there be a whip in the void? And who could ambush him so accurately? Hysteria. Fuck. Why did I run into it again? Does the void belong to it? Why can it just come out of nowhere? Ling Han hurriedly tore open space again. He had to escape from the void. Otherwise, if he fell into Hysteria's hands, he really didn't know what would happen. He wasn't a 7th tier, so he couldn't be undying and indestructible. In a certain medium-level dimension, a celestial king was refining his celestial tool at the crater of a volcano. He had already been here for 200 million years, and he was only a step away from success. There was a look of excitement on his face. Forging a celestial tool with his own hands was like watching his own child being born. It was an indescribable sense of joy and accomplishment. Thud. A look of shock suddenly appeared on his face because a huge space had suddenly appeared in the magma layer beneath the volcano's crater. There was void energy surging, but this was not the most important thing. There was actually a man who had fallen out of it. There was a black rope wrapped around his ankle, and upon closer inspection, it seemed to be some kind of tentacle that emitted an extremely evil aura. Fuck, what the hell was this? Chapter 2882, 2882, Shocking Connection. Chapter 2882, 2882 Shocking Connection. 2882 Shocking Connection. This celestial king's name was Yin Jiuling, and he had only broken through to the celestial king tier a billion years ago. However, divine metal was hard to come by, so it wasn't until 200 million years ago that he finally managed to obtain a piece and was able to forge his own precious tool. Being able to become a celestial king, he had naturally seen a lot of things. However, when he suddenly saw the volcano erupting and a person running out, he was still so shocked that he couldn't control himself. One had to know that this was a volcanic crater that could refine divine metal. The scorching heat was extremely terrifying, and even 7th heaven or 8th heaven celestial kings could be burned to ashes by the extreme heat. Thus, he was shocked, and the celestial tool in his hand instantly dropped. It fell into the boiling lava. "Ah, my celestial tool," he exclaimed, his expression full of regret. Unless he advanced into the 8th heaven, he would not be able to withstand such scorching heat. Otherwise, he would be courting death if he rashly went down into the lava. At this moment, he naturally hated the man in front of him to death. However, the other party could actually appear from the lava. Just how terrifying did his strength have to be? Thus, he only stared at the man. He saw the man using his hand as a knife to cut the tentacle on his ankle very fast, as if that was the most terrifying thing in the world, making for a very beaten picture. In fact, this was indeed the case, as this was Hysteria's tentacle. Although Ling Han successfully escaped from the void in time, one of Hysteria's tentacles had still managed to wrap around his ankle, and he had brought it out with him. Fortunately, the void closed in time, and the tentacle was cut off like it was severed by a switchblade. Before Ling Han could heave a sigh of relief, an incomparably evil intent rushed into his mind. At the same time, images appeared in his mind, but they didn't come from this intent. Instead, they came from the depths of his memories. What? He still had such a memory? Ling Han was shocked. Could it be that this was the awakening Meng Dong was talking about? Why was it related to Hysteria again? Images flashed through Ling Han's mind. He saw a strange creature that was indescribably huge, and its entire body was covered in tentacles. It was clinging onto a dimension, as if it was trying hard to squeeze into it, but was unable to. From this comparison, one could tell that it was actually about the size of a dimension, or even larger. It was too terrifying. What kind of creature could grow to such an extent? A name suddenly surfaced in Ling Han's mind: Hysteria. It could only be Hysteria. It manifested as a dimension and devoured everything. Could it be that this was the real scene of it confronting the flaming frost realm? Ling Han was greatly shaken. He did not know why he would have such a memory, and it just so happened that it was the power of Hysteria that stimulated this memory. Hysteria could always find him in the void and attack him quickly. Could it be related to this? There was more. Ling Han was suddenly startled. Previously, although Hysteria had come aggressively and even attacked him, it clearly had no intention of killing him. It was as if it just wanted to stimulate this memory buried in his body. Ling Han felt like he was about to go crazy. What did Hysteria mean? Had it been trying to snipe him several times just to let him see some kind of memory? No, there was also an indescribably evil intent that seemed to be awakening some kind of suppressed power in his body. Boom. Images kept flashing in his mind. That huge living being was constantly confronting some dimension, and in that dimension, there were countless elites embroiled in resistance against the invasion of this huge living being. These were all heavenly venerates. Ling Han came to a realization. This was definitely a battle between Hysteria and the elites of the flaming frost realm. The scene continued to flash, and Hysteria was still unable to conquer this dimension. Thus, its body trembled, and hundreds of light spots surged out of its body and traversed the void. At this moment, the scene changed, following these light spots. Some light spots encountered the energy storm in the void and were quickly annihilated, but some light spots passed through the void and appeared in other dimensions. The image followed closely behind one of the specks of light and entered a dimension. It instantly gave Ling Han a strong sense of familiarity. The celestial realm? The speck of light didn't stop. It passed through the celestial realm, entered the ancient realm, and then entered a small world from the ancient realm. Shio. It entered the body of a person there. It was a woman. She had a big belly, but her clothes were ragged. It was obvious at first glance that she was extremely poor. More than a month later, she gave birth to a boy, but she died in childbirth. The boy was adopted, but he was soon living on the streets, engaged in petty theft. However, by chance, he became the disciple of a cultivation sect and embarked on a different path of life. Later on, this boy actually discovered that he had astonishing natural talent in alchemy, so he began to learn alchemy. Ling Han's jaw dropped involuntarily because this was his previous life. Soon, he saw how he was bullied by the heavenly phoenix divine maiden and searched for ancient sites everywhere in an attempt to turn the tables on her. In the end, he was killed by a tremor from the Black Tower, but his soul was preserved by the Black Tower. It was only after 10,000 years had passed that he had been sent into his current body and replaced the original host. During this process, the speck of light didn't perish, but underwent subtle changes. Pong. Ling Han's body shook, and he suddenly woke up. The images in his mind all disappeared, and the thousands of powers of dimension in his body erupted at the same time, forcefully obliterating the evil intent that Hysteria had sent into his mind. Wang. His mind lit up, and a seal appeared, instantly suppressing the other heavenly venerable seals until they paled in comparison. This was actually a first-grade seal. Ling Han was completely stupefied. For a moment, his mind was filled with a myriad of thoughts, and he felt that his heart was in a chaotic mess. There was too much information. He forced himself to calm down and began to organize all the information into logical sequence. If the scene he saw was real and not something Hysteria had deliberately fabricated to deceive him, then he really was inextricably linked to Hysteria. Based on what he saw, he had a guess. More than an epoch ago, Hysteria had not been able to conquer the flaming frost realm and crack this tough nut even after a long time. Thus, it had come up with a plan, shooting out hundreds of bright spots from its body. This was very likely similar to Seed of Life, an inheritance, or something of the sort. In short, some of these spots of light were destroyed in the void, while others went to various dimensions. As for Ling Han, he was the one chosen by the spot of light. Logically speaking, he should have obtained some kind of inheritance, but for some reason, this spot of light had hibernated instead. It was only when Hysteria came into direct contact with him just now that all these hidden images reappeared, allowing him to see this piece of history. This should be an inheritance because he had obtained a first-grade heavenly venerable seal. Considering that Ming Dong kept saying that Ling Han had yet to awaken, and even called him his little brother, he should also be someone Hysteria had chosen. What was the purpose? It was impossible for Hysteria to specially bestow gifts on them. From the very beginning, there was only one goal, and that was to destroy the Genesis world and devour it. Therefore, the mission of these chosen people should be to destroy the flaming frost realm and weaken its power so that it could be devoured. This deduction should be very reasonable, but the problem here was that Ling Han was not stupid. Why would he help Hysteria? Chapter 2883, 2883 Part of the Truth. Chapter 2883, 2883 Part of the Truth. 2883 Part of the Truth. Ling Han didn't think that he had to work for Hysteria just because the latter had given him a first-grade, heavenly venerable seal. This was too foolish. He wasn't that stupid, and Hysteria shouldn't be that naive either. Hang on. He suddenly recalled that an evil consciousness had entered his mind previously, but before it could do anything, it was obliterated by the powers of dimension surging in his body. Could it be that, under normal circumstances, this consciousness should have affected him, causing him to defect and become a traitor to join Hysteria's side? This was very likely. It very logically explained his prior conclusion. However, there was another problem. Hysteria would never do something that it was not confident in, so how had he managed to resist this consciousness? Hysteria's strength had surpassed the 7th tier. Was its consciousness so easily obliterated? Ling Han knew that he was very impressive. He had cultivated tens of thousands of powers of dimension, and he himself was equivalent to a small Genesis world. However, it was still a small Genesis world. After all, he had not even been able to defeat Xin Qihu. So what right did he have to be so strong as to obliterate Hysteria's consciousness? The more he realized, the more confused Ling Han became. He had solved some of the mysteries. For example, why did Meng Dong think that he was one of his group? Why did he keep calling him little brother? In a sense, they were indeed the same group. Why did Hysteria always find him so easily in the void? It was because the spot of light in his body was like a bright light in the darkness. It was too obvious to Hysteria. These spots of light were just a part of it. So annoying, so annoying. Ling Han opened his eyes. He was so frustrated that he wanted to beat someone up. Then, he saw Yin Juling standing in front of him. "Greetings, my lord." Yin Juling's heart skipped a beat. He hurriedly cupped his fists and bowed. Although he was grumbling mentally, because Ling Han had given him a fright, and even the celestial tool that he had almost forged successfully was gone, Ling Han's strength was clearly above his. To speak of nothing else, just the might he had exuded after opening his eyes just now had almost scared him out of his wits. It should be known that he was a celestial king, and was already standing at the same level as the regulations. If he was already so frightened, it could be seen how terrifying Ling Han was. Ling Han merely glanced at him, and immediately understood the entire sequence of events. He had just not paid attention, but that didn't mean that he didn't know. It was merely hidden in his memories, and now that he had dug it out, he understood. He nodded. With a flip of his hand, a piece of divine metal appeared. He shaped it casually, and this piece of divine metal quickly turned into the shape of a sword. Then, he threw it at Yin Juling. "I'll compensate for your sword." Yin Juling accepted the sword numbly. His mouth was about to split open from shock. This was divine metal, the sturdiest thing in the world. Ninth Heaven celestial kings could indeed break the divine metal, but it would definitely not be as easy as how Ling Han had easily and casually shaped it like it was clay. Such power surpassed the level of celestial king tier. Yin Juling fell to his knees with a thud and said respectfully, "Greetings, senior. I am Yin Juling." Ling Han waved his hand dismissively and said, "Go. This place is very dangerous. If you continue to stay here, I'm afraid your life will be in danger." "Yes." Yin Juling hurriedly left with the divine sword in his hands. This model had already been forged. Next, he only needed to nurture it with his own martial intent, and it would become a celestial tool. Ling Han stood still. He wasn't trying to scare Yin Juling, but if a great battle were to break out later, a mere first heaven celestial king wouldn't even be worthy of being considered cannon fodder. A moment later, the void split open, and a person walked out. "Meng Dong." "Little brother, now you know who you are, right?" he said with a smile. Ling Han's expression remained unchanged. He was not surprised by Meng Dong's appearance. Meng Dong was one of Hysteria's men, and he had awakened his memories. It was only natural that Meng Dong would come and recruit him. Ling Han raised his hand. Wong, a seal lit up, suppressing heaven and earth until they paled in color. Endless lightning immediately struck toward him. This was the first-grade heavenly venerable seal that he had just obtained. It was very strange. He didn't need to comprehend this seal. He had mastered it as soon as it appeared. It was as if he had learned it long ago, but he had forgotten and left it in some hidden corner. When Meng Dong saw this, he immediately laughed out loud. "Little brother, you've finally returned." Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "I have some problems with my body, and some of my memories are not very clear." Meng Dong nodded. "You are indeed different from the others. Once we advance to the heavenly venerable tier, we will automatically awaken, but you had yet to awaken even after reaching the second tier. It was our Lord who exerted force and forcibly stimulated your dormant memories." As expected. Although Ling Han already had a guess, hearing Meng Dong say it himself still shook his heart. However, there was still no change in his expression. He still had this bit of self-control. Our Lord? It seemed that Meng Dong was completely on Hysteria's side. Ling Han deliberately looked distressed. My mind is a mess now. It's filled with confusion. Little brother, you have to know that we are all a part of the Lord. In the future, we will all return to our Lord and become the rulers of the entire Genesis world. Meng Dong's face revealed a fanatical expression. Little brother, if it wasn't for the power of our Lord in your body, how could you be so freakish and become such a powerful heavenly Venerate? If it wasn't for our Lord, how could you have the ability to devour life essence and transform it into your own cultivation level? Everything we have is bestowed by our Lord, so you must firmly believe in it and not let your thoughts run wild. Ling Han's heart stirred. Back then, he had been chosen by the Black Tower. Was it also because he had the power of hysteria in his body? A trace of confusion flashed in his heart. Could it be that it was all because of hysteria that he had managed to reach this level? Were all his efforts meaningless? No. Ling Han immediately thought to himself. Whether it was the power of hysteria or the Black Tower, they might indeed be of use to him on his path of growth, but the one who truly decided his fate was still himself. Ling Han said, "What should we do now?" Cultivate diligently. Once we advance to the 6th tier, we can begin to take action. Meng Dong revealed an intense killing intent. Ling Han's heart trembled. If others said that they wanted to reach the 6th tier, that might just be an extravagant hope. However, Meng Dong and the others all had a trace of hysteria's power in their bodies, so advancing to the 6th tier was definitely not difficult. It had to be known that hysteria was capable of creation in the void, and the 6th tiers it created could form an army, so it was definitely not impossible to help Meng Dong and the others reach 6th tier. At that time, Lin Luo and the other 7th tier elites would be restricted by the main body of hysteria. Behind the front lines, hundreds of 6th tier elites would display their might at the same time. How could the Flaming Frost Realm manage to stop them? When all the living beings in the Flaming Frost Realm died out, the power of heaven and earth would decline to the extreme, and hysteria would be able to directly devour the Flaming Frost Realm. There would be no need to care about those 7th tiers at all. Moreover, now that the realm battlefield had been sealed, there were no more external threats, and only internal strife remained. Just look at how many heavenly Venerates died a while ago. By the time Meng Dong and the others acted, how many 6th tiers could there be left in the Flaming Frost Realm? The more Ling Han thought about it, the more apprehensive he became. Could it be that all of this was Hysteria's scheme? It sealed off the realm battlefield so that there were signs of peace in the world, which caused the heavenly Venerates to start fighting among themselves, while the power hysteria had laid in ambush was continuously growing. At that time, if it suddenly launched an attack, it could instantly destroy the Flaming Frost Realm. Hee, when can I meet my other brothers and sisters? Ling Han asked. If he could grasp the identities of all these people, then he could ask Zhou Hong, Chu Hao, and the others to take action and quell this chaos in advance. Meng Dong laughed. Little brother, don't be anxious. When the time comes, I'll naturally let you meet everyone. Fuck, this guy was quite vigilant and still refused to trust Ling Han fully. Ling Han didn't say anything else. As the saying went, haste makes waste. He couldn't alert the enemy. Chapter 2884, 2884 Decision. Chapter 2884, 2884 Decision. 2884 Decision. Meng Dong gave Ling Han another speech, mostly to try and calm his emotions. After all, Ling Han had suddenly found out that he belonged to Hysteria's side. How could he recover so quickly? After a while, Meng Dong said, "Little brother, let's keep in touch in the future. I am very excited to be working with you." For a moment, Ling Han considered the possibility of taking Meng Dong down on the spot and forcing his secret out of him. However, after some consideration, he decided to give up on that idea. He wasn't sure if Hysteria had any more tricks up its sleeve. What if Meng Dong's mind were to explode directly under duress? He would then be losing a very valuable source of information. All right, let's keep in touch. Ling Han nodded. Suddenly, he remembered something and came to a halt. Was it our Lord's plan to lead us to that lost dimension? Meng Dong had a puzzled look. I'm not too sure about that either. Logically, that shouldn't be the case. While it's true that the current situation would lead to the deaths of a lot of heavenly venerates, there are simply too many resources lying there, which is more than enough to give the surviving ones a huge boost in strength. I'll be able to get clear answers from our Lord once I get in touch with him. Well then, I'm going. Opening the void, Meng Dong naturally headed towards the lost dimension. There were simply too many precious materials there. Even a sixth tier would see it as a treasured land. Ling Han was deep in thought. Unknown to him, there seemed to be several different forces vying for superiority. Hysteria was undoubtedly at the top. Its main body was in the midst of suppressing the flaming frost realm, but it had plenty of tricks up its sleeve. If it was allowed to carry on undeterred, it just might devour the Genesis world one day. However, with the appearance of a lost primitive dimension, a number of great herbs and heavenly venerable seals that shouldn't belong in this world emerged. They would cause a heavenly venerate to quickly increase in strength, and there was a good chance that a new seventh tier would be born in the near future. This was definitely not an outcome Hysteria wanted. How did that lost primitive dimension get destroyed in the first place? Moreover, it was a dimension overlapping another dimension. Theoretically, this wasn't possible. What sort of power was capable of surpassing the seventh tier and doing such a thing? Ling Han stood for a long time. He had gathered a lot of information in a single day, and he needed time to properly analyze it. After 10 days, he tore a rip into the void and continued his journey. He had an unshakable faith. No matter what Hysteria had done to him in the past, he was still the same person as before and would not live his life for anyone else's sake. In his heart, his family and friends were more important than anything else. He was definitely going to protect the Genesis world and would not let Hysteria have its way. This time around, he didn't have to worry about Hysteria finding him as he traveled the void. Firstly, Hysteria assumed that it had no more reason to seek him out because he had been awakened. Secondly, Ling Han had destroyed the mark that Hysteria had left. Without a lighthouse, how was Hysteria going to find him in the vastness of the void? Half a year had passed, and Ling Han finally found the lost dimension. He descended into the dimension. This was the outermost dimension, and Ling Han did not stop at all. He passed through the ground layer and headed towards the dimension below. After passing through the second layer, he returned to base and regrouped with Zhou Hong and the rest. He then told everyone everything about his body and his relation to Hysteria. He didn't hide a single thing, because he held no guilt. The revelation left Zhou Hong and the rest in shock. They never would have thought Hysteria would have such a play. Ling Han, this is a grave matter. Please allow me to personally search your spirit, said Zhou Hong. It wasn't because he didn't trust Ling Han, but Hysteria's methods were simply too cunning. No one knew if it had placed some sort of trap just waiting to be set off in the future in Ling Han's mind so that Ling Han would fall under its control. Ling Han agreed. He also wanted to know if he had been able to thoroughly remove all possible threats. Zhou Hong placed his palm on Ling Han's head and inserted his divine sense. He gave the latter a thorough check, and he retracted his hand after a while. How is it? Both Lin Xiaoyang and Chu Hao asked. Zhou Hong had a curious look on his face. This brat has limitless powers of dimension inside of him. It was like a giant millstone. My divine sense can't get inside at all, and was quickly ground to nothing. Is it really so amazing to progress on this path? Lin Xiaoyang asked in surprise. Seeing the puzzled look on Ling Han's face, he continued, truth be told, my father also once had a similar theory of compressing the powers of dimension from the entire Genesis world. However, this wasn't something that could be put into practice. Even a pseudo-heavenly venerate didn't have that kind of capacity. The power of 1,000 dimensions was the limit, and even then, this was nothing but a static force. One would not be able to go any further once they reached this limit. Hence, my father and his peers came up with another solution, and that was to imbue a small dimension inside of themselves before reaching the heavenly venerable tier. That way, the dimension's strength would grow along with one's own power. In the early stage, this would not even compare to a heavenly Venerate with the strength of a few hundred dimensions. However, there was an endless potential for growth. Once you reach the 6th tier, this method would then prove to be the better solution. Yulian and Xin Qihu are prime examples of this. It was no wonder they only took a few million years to reach the 4th tier. They didn't have to gather strength from one dimension at a time. Of course they'd be faster. However, you somehow managed to take a different path altogether, and more or less merged both methods into one. If you were to train this to its full potential, hiss. Zhou and the other two gasped at the same time. How strong would Ling Han be then? According to my estimation, Ling Han's potential for development is limitless. Perhaps he can leap out of the 7th tier and stand at the same height as Hysteria, or even surpass it, Chu Hao said. Lin Xiaoyang also nodded. Thus, Ling Han will definitely not be controlled by Hysteria. It will definitely not allow any person who can threaten its existence to grow. Zhou looked at Ling Han. Something shocking must have happened to you, causing the control of Hysteria to fail. It also allowed you to accommodate the powers of dimension of the entire Genesis world, turning you into another Genesis world with endless potential for development. The three of them were certain that Ling Han's situation was too unique, and definitely not something Hysteria could control. The problem now is to find Mingdong and the others and eliminate them in advance. Otherwise, when they reach 6th tier, it will really be difficult to deal with them, Lin Xiaoyang said solemnly. However, we only know one Mingdong and a Lu Xie now. If we act rashly, it's very likely that we'll alert the enemy and let the others completely hide their identities. They definitely won't make trouble unless they're at the 6th tier. Therefore, this matter still has to fall on Ling Han's shoulders. We will investigate the surviving dregs of Hysteria and then announce it to the world. Then, we will attack together and eliminate these remnants. Ling Han nodded. I'll do my best. He took his leave. First, he boosted the devouring metal in his hand to the highest level. Then, he refined it into a supreme precious tool that was completely inclined to defense. Even the devouring metal had its limitations. The martial intent it could be branded with was limited, so it was good at attack, but not good at defense. After all, it was only a tool. This was a completely defensive supreme precious tool. Coupled with the toughness of the devouring metal, its defensive ability was extremely strong. Ling Han returned to the first dimensional layer and moved everyone in the celestial guest residence over. From now on, this would be the new celestial guest residence. Then, he called the Empress and Hunyou over and continued to explore for veins of ore. He had to reach 3rd tier as soon as possible. Otherwise, he really wouldn't feel safe in this chaotic world. Even Xin Qihu could make him flee in a sorry state. If Xin Qihu were to hear this, he would definitely fly into a rage. He was the greatest prodigy of all eternity, not just some nobody. After so many years, almost all the veins of or in this dimension had actually been explored, so Ling Han headed towards the land's heart. Perhaps there was another dimension below. Chapter 2885, 2885 Primitive Stone Slab. Chapter 2885, 2885 Primitive Stone Slab. 2885 Primitive Stone Slab. Since an overlap dimension had already appeared, why couldn't there be another? Ling Han and the others headed underground. It was said that some forces had gone deep underground to see if there was a 3rd dimension. As for whether there was one or not, it was currently an absolute secret and could not possibly be leaked. The ground structure here was actually very solid. The soil had been compressed, and the same piece of soil was at least 10 times heavier than in the Flaming Frost dimension. However, due to the lack of the support of the power of dimension, this solid layer of soil couldn't withstand a single blow. Io! Hunyou suddenly let out a cry of pain. Nyou's head, it's going to be split in half. Ling Han turned around and asked, what's going on? Nyou got hit. Hunyou rubbed her head, where a bump had abruptly appeared on her forehead. Ling Han hurriedly walked back and saw that there was actually a huge stone slab in Hunyou's path. The little girl had crashed into it, and not only did it forcefully stop her, but it also caused a bump on her forehead. However, this was extremely unbelievable. Hunyo was a 4th tier, and her physique had been tempered by 3 types of fundamental powers. How tough did her physique have to be? Yet, it was actually stopped by a stone slab, and a bump appeared on her head. Ling Han looked at the stone slab. It had already shattered. After all, it had been rammed by a 4th tier. Other than the devouring metal at great accomplishment level, what other material in the world could be so hard? Fortunately, Hunyo had only gotten a little scrape and was not seriously injured. Hence, Ling Han focused on studying this stone slab and discovered that this thing was actually the stone material used to construct the city walls of the defenses in the realm battlefield. This stone material was incomparably sturdy, but it couldn't be made into any precious tool because it didn't have any spirituality. There are words on it. The Empress also walked over. Ling Han nodded. There were indeed many words engraved densely on it, but they were completely different from any of the existing words and could not be read. Oh, Nyo's head hurts so much. Ling Han, quickly blow on it for Nyo, Hunyo said, acting spoiled. All Ling Han could do was hold the little girl in his arms. As he rubbed her small head, he continued to study this stone slab. I wonder what's written here, the Empress said. Let's get Wally here and ask him. Ling Han thought for a moment. Although Wally might not recognize it, he was good at deduction. As long as there were enough words, he might be able to decipher it. He thought about it again. Forget it. I'll go look for him. You and Hunyo go on first. I'll leave a trace of power on you. It can be a light that will guide me back here, Ling Han said. The Empress nodded, pulled Hunyo along, and left first. No, Nyo wants to be with Ling Han. Hunyo struggled, but was unable to shake off the Empress and could only call out in vain. Ling Han put away the stone slab and took a step forward. He was already out of the void, and then tore open space to return to the void. However, he was already in a completely different position now the powers of dimension in his body were channeled. He searched for the location of the flaming frost realm, and then spread out his body, shuttling through the void like lightning. It took him more than 20 years to return to the flaming frost realm. Then, he found Wally at the world's paramount martial academy. This guy had stayed in the martial academy all this while and had no plans on leaving. Come, analyze it for me and tell me what the words on it mean. Ling Han handed the stone slab to Wally. It wasn't easy for him to find written records in that lost land. Perhaps he could uncover the secrets of that place. 100 pieces of divine metal, Wally said, after taking a look. Why did you increase the price? Ling Han asked with a smile. He naturally didn't care about 100 pieces of divine metal anymore, but teasing Wally was very fun. Wally looked at Ling Han seriously. This is from a completely different civilization. It's extremely difficult for me to crack it. Ling Han laughed loudly and threw out several hundred pieces of divine metal with a wave of his hand. This was the common currency for stone gambling, so he naturally had plenty on him. Wally didn't ask him why he gave more. In any case, Ling Han could give more, but he couldn't give less. How long will it take? Ling Han asked. A few years now, Wally said. Ling Han was curious. Then what about in the past? Probably a few hundred years, he said. It wasn't very long either. Ling Han nodded, and then sat cross-legged at the side, waiting quietly. He had just sorted out his thoughts. He was actually involved with hysteria. This wasn't something that could be let go so easily. The two of them fell silent. One was studying the words on the stone slab, while the other was thinking about his own matters. Time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, 7 years had passed. It's done, Wally suddenly said. Ling Han snapped out of his deep meditation and opened his eyes. Tell me about it. There's a major event recorded on it. The general idea is that an extremely powerful creature appeared and threatened their world, as well as countless similar worlds. Therefore, the elites of their world joined forces with the elites of other worlds to resist this creature, Wally said. Ling Han was stunned. Was this referring to hysteria? Be more specific, he said. What's the name of this powerful creature? Wally shook his head. I can't translate this, because the name itself is meaningless. That was indeed the case. Ling Han nodded slowly, organizing his thoughts in his mind. Could the powerful living being mentioned on the stone slab be Hysteria? This was too consistent with Hysteria's description. However, the time didn't match. Hysteria didn't appear when the Genesis world was born. Instead, after the Genesis world developed to a certain stage, it was a cultivator from a certain dimension that suddenly had an idea and created such a monster. From then on, this monster gradually ran out of control. It devoured all the cultivators, living beings, and even the dimension itself, replacing them. From then on, the prelude to the realm war began. At that time, Lin Luo and the others should have already become 7th tiers. If it was said that 2 dimensions overlapped and were lost in the void together, and they knew nothing about it, how could this be possible? But if it had not been for Hysteria, where would such a terrifying guy have gone? He couldn't have disappeared into thin air, right? And there was that dead 7th tier as well. He should have been undying and indestructible. The overlapping of 2 dimensions could only be done with the combined efforts of at least several hundred 7th tiers, which was even more inconceivable. Ling Han sighed. It looked like he was still far from unraveling all the mysteries. Will you go to that dimension in the void to take a look? Suppressing such emotions, he asked Wally. No, Wally refused immediately without a second thought. All right then. Then I will come and visit you again in the future when I have the time. Wally scoffed. You will only come when you need something. Ling Han laughed loudly. You're right. He directly tore open space and entered into the void. Then, with the sliver of powers of dimension he had left on the Empress as a beacon, he traversed the void. This naturally took him another several decades before he again returned to that lost primitive dimension. Chapter 2886, 2886 Fei Bai Pig. Chapter 2886, 2886 Fei Bai Pig. 2886 Fei Bai Pig. Ling Han realized that he was really busy. How many times had he come here already? He shook his head and began to pass through the earth. He first arrived at the 2nd dimension, and then headed further underground. This was because the Empress had the power of dimension that he had left behind, and it could act as his guiding light. The Empress was clearly still further underground. Could there really be a 3rd dimension down there? Although Ling Han had already guessed this, when this scenario really happened, he still found it somewhat unbelievable. Overlapping 2 dimensions already required several hundred 7th tiers to act simultaneously. As for 3, just how powerful would they need to be? Ling Han didn't dare to think about it. At the very least, even if all the elites present were to join forces, they wouldn't be able to do it. Even Hysteria probably wouldn't be able to do it. Otherwise, if it could already overlap dimensions, how could it not be able to conquer the flaming frost realm? Ling Han sped up, and he continued to dive downwards. The power of the heavenly venerable tier surged, and all obstacles were unable to withstand a single blow from him, as if they were made from paper. He traveled like this for about 10 days. Shio. He broke through the last layer of the earth, and he appeared in a new world. A tall mountain rose hundreds of thousands of meters high, and a crevasse was hundreds of thousands of meters deep. In the past, this had clearly been a sea, but now the seawater had evaporated, leaving behind only a huge sinkhole. As expected, there was a 3rd dimension here. Ling Han sensed that this should also have been a high-level dimension in the past, but it was already dead now, and could only be identified based on the strength of the 6 fundamental powers. Of course, Ling Han could only sense one type of fundamental power now. He quickly probed which direction he should head in, then spread out his body again and sped forward. After a few more days, a mountain range appeared in front of him, and the Empress was within these mountains. Shio. Ling Han's figure descended, and he quickly found the Empress and Hun Yo. Ling Han. Hun Yo jumped over first and hugged him. You're too bad. Nyo's head is about to burst open, but you don't care at all. Nyo is going to die of sadness. This little girl. Ling Han didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He hugged the little girl and said, all right, aren't I back now? Then Niu wants you to kiss Niu 100 times no, 1,000 times. Hu Niu bargained, her big eyes blinking. Ling Han was slightly embarrassed. It was not only the Empress and Hu Niu here, but also a large group of other people as well. It was fine if they kissed a few times, but kissing 100 or 1,000 times was a little awkward. We'll kiss when we get home, he said to Hu Niu. Only then did Hu Niu nod, beaming with joy. Sometimes, she was quite easy to pacify. What's the situation? He asked the Empress. A huge ore deposit has been discovered here. After all these years of mining, there isn't much left, but the essence should still be here. Therefore, no one can mine it now. Everyone has an eye on it, and we're going to have a fight over it, the Empress said. Ling Han nodded and asked, who are the elites there? There are quite a few 4th tiers, and even a few 5th tiers, the Empress said solemnly. Ling Han also frowned. He could deal with 4th tiers, but when it came to 5th tiers, he wouldn't be able to deal with them even if he used the 9th grade combination seals. Unless... With a sudden flip of her hand, the Empress took out several great herbs. Over the years, we've also unearthed quite a few great herbs, so we've left some for you. Ling Han, after you eat them, will you be able to reach the 3rd tier? Hu Niu asked. Ling Han was originally at the peak stage of the 2nd tier, and he had already strengthened his foundations previously. When pursued by Xin Qihu, he had even refined his power to an incomparably pure level. As long as he advanced his cultivation level a little further, he would be able to break through. Perhaps it was just a matter of a few more great herbs. Ling Han nodded and said, I'll try. If he advanced into the 3rd tier, he would have the ability to fight against even 5th tiers. Of course, whether he could suppress them or not was another matter. After all, having 5th tier battle prowess and crushing 5th tiers were two completely different matters. Celestial Maidens, this is... Just as Ling Han was about to enter the new celestial guest residence, he saw an imposing-looking man walk over with large strides. There was a gentle smile on his face, but it did not conceal the pride in the depths of his eyes. Ling Han looked at the Empress and asked, Trouble? Just go into seclusion. I'll take care of it, the Empress said indifferently, appearing to be completely unconcerned. Ling Han nodded, and he instantly entered the celestial guest residence with a flash. Wayaya, why don't you ask Niu? Niu can take care of it too. Hu Niu jumped around, appearing extremely displeased. Only then did the Empress turn to look at the man. It has nothing to do with you. The man's smile didn't diminish, and he showed a caring expression. I'm just worried that the 2 celestial maidens will be deceived by others. Fei Bai Pig, you're so annoying. Hu Niu made a face at him. Celestial maiden who, my name is Fei Bai Pig, the man corrected Hu Niu, but there was a smile on his face. If Hu Niu was only beautiful, then as a dignified 4th tier, he would not take her seriously at all. However, Hu Niu's beauty was pure, natural, and not pretentious at all. This was incomparably rare. Just look, what heavenly Venerate would make faces. She was the only one who looked fresh and refined. And in the case of the Empress, besides being beautiful, she was also proud to the core. This was also her natural personality, which he liked. It's still easier to remember Fei Bai Pig, Hu Niu muttered, and then put her hands at her waist. Didn't I tell you to get lost? Why are you still standing here? Do you want to snatch Niu's meat? Her face was full of suspicion and vigilance, causing Fei Bai Pig not to know whether to laugh or cry. He was a dignified 4th tier. Did he have to snatch food from others? Don't worry, celestial maiden Hu. I won't snatch it from you, he explained. You won't snatch it, but you still want to eat it, right? Hu Niu's ability to reason was completely different from others. She couldn't help but turn her body to the side to guard the food in her hand, as if a piece would be missing if someone just looked at it. The Empress was impatient. Fei Bai Pig, you're not welcome here. I've already said this many times. Fei Bai Pig's gaze turned cold. Initially, he didn't mind taking things slowly. After all, Hu Niu and the Empress were a 4th tier and 3rd tier. Being able to cultivate to such a height, and to be as beautiful as a fairy, each with their own unique characteristics, they naturally made his heart palpitate. Spending some time courting them would also be worth it. Only such a Tao partner was worthy of accompanying him in his long life. Otherwise, he would get sick of her sooner or later. However, Ling Han's appearance caused him to develop a strong sense of danger. If he were to slowly court them, then it might all be for naught. All right then, please be careful, celestial maidens. After all, the people here are complicated. If you encounter any danger, feel free to come to my base. I'll definitely do my best to help. He didn't continue to pester them. Instead, a warm smile appeared on his face. He turned around and left. What do you think he means by that? Hunyo asked the Empress. Who cares what kind of schemes he's up to? The Empress didn't care. She sat down cross-legged and closed her eyes to rest. Arrogant woman. Hunyo grumbled and also sat down. Chapter 2887, 2887 Arrival of Enemies. Chapter 2887, 2887 Arrival of Enemies. 2887 Arrival of Enemies. There were many people in the mountains, but no one spoke. The atmosphere seemed rather oppressive. This was because there was a high chance that a huge battle would break out at any moment and a major reshuffling of cards would occur. Many people would be eliminated in the battle, losing the right to touch this last vein of ore. Sure enough, a few days later, the purge began, and elites led teams to chase off the lone elites. After sweeping away these small fries, the remaining major factions would naturally fight to determine the ownership of the final and most precious vein of ore. It was still relatively quiet where the Empress and Hunyo were, but after half a month, there were still people who came over. Celestial maidens, are you willing to join our Xuanwu alliance? For people walked over together. 2 of them were 4th tiers, while the other 2 were 3rd tiers. This was an extremely powerful group. Not interested. The Empress rejected him coldly without even opening her eyes. Then we have no choice but to ask the 2 of you to leave, a 4th tier stated calmly. Does this place belong to you? What right do you have to chase me away? Hunyo immediately jumped up. It's fine if you want to stay, but the 2 of you will have to be strong enough, the 4th tier said. Don't waste words on them. Just chase them away, another 4th tier said. All right. The first 4th tier nodded. He had a head full of gray hair, but his face was as young as a youth in his late teens. It was very strange. He and the other red-robed 4th tier attacked at the same time, launching an attack at Hunyo, while the other 2 3rd tiers joined forces to attack the Empress. 2 4th tiers versus 1 4th tier, 2 3rd tiers versus 1 3rd tier. Both sides were a 2-on-1 battle. It was obvious that they had already made prior arrangements, and it was definite that 2 of them would be dealing with one each. Ha ha ha, Nyo loves fighting the most. Hunyo laughed loudly. Her figure was incomparably agile, and she immediately charged towards the 2 4th tiers. The Empress, on the other hand, remained seated cross-legged. Only when the 2 3rd tiers arrived did she let out a soft exclamation and send out a palm strike. Wong, a terrifying power surged, and a jade-like palm that was as large as the heavens appeared, pressing down on the 2 3rd tiers. Reality proved that someone like her, who had condensed a number of powers of dimension to break through to the 1st tier, would have a huge advantage in the early stage. However, because there was a limit to the powers of dimension, this advantage would also be continuously weakened as her cultivation level increased. But even so, she was still far stronger than her peers of the same cultivation level. Even if she did really reach the 7th tier one day, she could still maintain a considerable advantage. The Empress's current cultivation level was the early stage of the 3rd tier, but her battle prowess had directly soared to the peak stage of the 3rd tier. Hong, this palm of hers was too terrifying, enough to crush 99% of all 3rd tiers. Not good. The 2 3rd tiers both cried out in alarm. They were both in the late stage of the 3rd tier. Originally, they had the upper hand in terms of cultivation level, and now that it was a 2-on-1 fight, they should have a firm grasp of victory. However, they did not expect the Empress to actually be so freakish, which caused them to be completely unable to react in time. Wong, Seals lit up on their bodies, and they both channeled heavenly venerable seals at the same time. Pong pong. They each launched an attack to meet the Empress's strike. Shock waves rippled out. The two third tiers joined forces, and with the help of the heavenly venerable seals, they finally withstood the Empress's attack. Their expressions couldn't help but change. Although they had blocked this attack, the Empress had only done it casually and hadn't used her full strength at all. If she had also channeled the heavenly venerable seals, how could they have withstood it? Not good. There was an unexpected variable for their plans. The Empress opened her eyes, her gaze filled with killing intent. She actually hadn't killed the enemy with a single strike. Her pride had already been stimulated. With a humph, her figure flashed, and she took the initiative to charge towards the two third tiers. A heavenly venerable seal was channeled by her, adding a terrifying power to her attacks, and her divine might was incomparably terrifying. The two third tiers didn't dare to take her assault head-on at all, and hurriedly retreated. If they took it head-on, they would probably be courting death. Lord Crimson Emperor. They pleaded for help from the red-robed fourth tier. Interesting. The red-robed fourth tier humphed lightly, then turned around and sent a palm strike toward the Empress. Pong. The might of fourth tier was incomparably terrifying. Pong. The Empress's figure was forcefully stopped. One side had battle prowess of the peak of the third tier, while the other was in the middle stage of the fourth tier. The disparity between them was too great. Ha 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 ha, shameless woman, do you want Nyo to help you? Hunyo clapped her hands and laughed. She had never liked the Empress, so why would she take the initiative to help? The Empress didn't say a word, avoiding the red-robed fourth tier and focusing on those two third tiers. Crimson Emperor, go and take down that third tier. I'll handle things here, the white-haired fourth tier said. All right. The red-robed fourth tier nodded. With such a casual attack, even if he could take down a peak stage third tier, he would still have to expend some effort. Shameless! Hunyo shouted lightly and intercepted the red-robed fourth tier. Little girl, you should take care of yourself first, the white-haired fourth tier said with a smile. He pressed down with his palm, forcing Hunyo to turn back and defend. That was because he was also in the middle stage of the fourth tier, which was much stronger than Hunyo. Nyo's angry now. Hunyo cried out, abruptly channeling a heavenly venerable seal, and her battle prowess instantly soared. This was a heavenly venerable seal she had obtained from unearthing stones, and it increased her strength by more than 20 times. In this way, her might instantly soared, and she broke through the blockade of the white-haired fourth tier and joined forces with the Empress. Whitehair, you can't even stop an early-stage fourth tier? The red-robed fourth tier looked at the white-haired fourth tier teasingly. The white-haired fourth tier humphed and similarly channeled a heavenly venerable seal of his own, immediately raising his battle prowess. Boom! He had an advantage in terms of cultivation level, but his heavenly venerable seal was inferior to Hunyo's, so their battle prowess was not much different. However, everyone knew that heavenly venerable seals could only release energy for 2 hours. At that time, Hunyo's battle prowess would rapidly decrease, and she would no longer be a match for him. However, for now, Hunyo was enough to restrain the two fourth tiers, allowing the Empress to free herself and suppress the two third tiers. The two third tiers could only continuously dodge, relying on the two fourth tiers to strike out from time to help them out of their dilemma. They were all incomparably ashamed and resentful. They had clearly come to suppress that third tier, but now they had become a burden. Fortunately, the time that Hunyo could display her might was limited. As long as they dragged it out for another 2 hours, she would be powerless to continue. 2 hours passed very quickly. Just as the red-robed man and the white-haired man were preparing to counter with all their might, Hunyo channeled the second seal, and there was not much decline to her battle prowess at all. What? This shocked the red-robed man and the white-haired man greatly. How could Hunyo still use a high-level heavenly venerable seal? Although it was only a 7th grade heavenly venerable seal, because 8th grade heavenly venerable seals were already considered top-notch, 7th grade heavenly venerable seals were definitely far above average. One had to remember something here. Before these primitive dimensions were discovered, just how many heavenly venerable seals were there in the world? It was only now that there were more heavenly venerable seals, but they were basically only of the 9th grade. However, Hunyo used 2 7th grade seals in a row. How could they not be shocked and envious? If it weren't for a certain someone having warned them in advance, they'd really want to kill Hunyo and extract these 2 7th grade seals from her. Fine, they would just have to last another 2 hours. Chapter 2888, 2888 Summoning Help. Chapter 2888, 2888 Summoning Help. 2888 Summoning Help. However, 2 hours later, Hunyo used a 3rd 7th grade seal. Over the years, how many raw stones had Ling Han and the others cut open? Although only a small portion of them revealed heavenly venerable seals, and most of them were handed over to Ling Han, the Empress, and Hunyo still received a few. How could this be? At a mountain peak very far away, Fei Bai Pig frowned. According to his plan, Hunyo and the Empress should be defeated very soon, and he would appear in time to save the 2 women. Although saving a damsel in distress was an old trick, it was a trick that never failed. But now, although the beauties were in danger, it seemed that they could solve it themselves. How could he then proceed to save them? Forget it, let's stick to the plan. With a leap, he appeared at the edge of the battle area. Crimson Emperor, White Demon, can you please give me some face and stop? He asked. The red-robed and white-haired duo stopped as instructed, but the Empress and Hunyo didn't. One continued to attack the 2 third tiers, while the other continued to focus a wild offensive on the red-robed and white-robed duo. In this way, the 2 third tiers could only continue fleeing, and the red-robed and white-haired men also had to face Hunyo, or else they would be equivalent to raising their heads to simply accept death. Fei Bai Pig's expression was ugly. He actually couldn't persuade them. What would happen to his pride? Celestial maidens, this is all a misunderstanding, he said. Crimson Emperor and White Demon are both capable members of our alliance, and they are here on my father's orders to chase off all other uninvolved persons. As long as the 2 of you join our alliance, you will naturally not be subjected to such restrictions. Hunyo giggled. Fei Bai Pig, you intentionally commanded these people to find trouble with us, and then you took the opportunity to save the damsel in distress, making us look at you in a different light and be grateful to you, right? What a pity. You didn't think that our power would surpass your imagination. Seeing Fei Bai Pig's expression change slightly, she continued, this trick is too old-fashioned. It has long been seen through by the wise and mighty Nyo. Fei Bai Pig couldn't help but clench his fists, his heart fluctuating slightly. Young Master Fei, these 2 women have at least 7th grade heavenly venerable seals on them. It's extremely likely that they're even more important than the veins of or here. I advise you to give up on those silly ideas and capture these 2 people to extract their heavenly venerable seals from them, the white-haired 4th tier said coldly. Although he addressed Fei Bai Pig as Young Master Fei, there was no respect in his tone. They were both in the 4th tier, and his cultivation level was slightly higher. He addressed Fei Bai Pig as Young Master Fei naturally because of Fei Bai Pig's father. That father was a 5th tier elite, and even if 100 4th tier elites were added together, they might not be a match for him. That's right. We pursue the supreme heavenly Tao, so how can we be distracted by women? The red-robed 4th tier also said. Fei Bai Pig's expression was ugly. He didn't want to give up on the Empress and Hunyo, because, in his opinion, the path of cultivation was long, so if he had such peerless beauties accompanying him, he naturally wouldn't feel bored or frustrated. However, after hearing what the 2 of them said, would the 2 women still follow him? He was a decisive person as well, and immediately nodded. All right. He joined the fray, and the 3 4th tiers exerted their strength together. Hunyo was instantly embroiled in a dilemma. Although Fei Bai Pig was only an early-stage 4th tier, he had channeled a 7th grade seal, and his strength was not inferior to Hunyo's. This became a 3-on-1 battle, giving Hunyo immense pressure. Wah, shameless. 3 against 1. Hunyo cried out loudly, but gritted her teeth and refused to retreat. It was easy for her to retreat, but what about the Empress? Although the two women fought frequently, they were both members of the Ling clan. How could they watch the other fall into enemy hands? Retreat, the Empress said. She approached Hunyao. Hee, if we can let you two escape, then we don't need to live anymore, the red-robed fourth tier said. He forcefully suppressed them, and another 2 hours passed. Hunyao finally didn't have a 4th, 7th grade seal to channel, and her battle prowess plummeted. Shameless woman, what other ideas do you have? Hunyao shouted at the Empress. The Empress shrugged, indicating that there was nothing she could do, either. Then we can only call Ling Han out, Hunyao shouted loudly. Ling Han, quickly come and save me. You still want to call for help? The white-haired 4th tier sneered. At this time, no one can save you. Oh, what makes you so sure? Shio. With a flash, Ling Han had already appeared. Ling Han, Hunyao shouted happily. She didn't care what kind of time or place this was, and immediately jumped onto Ling Han, giving him a bear hug. Although Fei Bai Pig had already given up on the two women, seeing Hunyao and Ling Han being so intimate, his expression still couldn't help but change. He snorted coldly and said, "Just a puny 2nd tier." His tone was filled with disdain. White hair and red robe also laughed loudly. What utter nonsense. They had thought that some super elite would be called out, but it was actually just a 2nd tier. What could a 2nd tier do? Ling Han stared at Fei Bai Pig. You dare to have designs on my wives? What are you? Before Fei Bai Pig could finish speaking, Ling Han had already charged over and threw a punch. This punch was so fast. Although Fei Bai Pig was slightly shocked, he didn't care at all. So what if Ling Han was fast? He was only a 2nd tier. Fei Bai Pig delivered a palm strike towards Ling Han. At this moment, he had already channeled a heavenly venerable seal, and his battle prowess was currently at its peak, reaching middle stage 4th tier, which could be considered to be incomparably terrifying. Pung! As the punch landed on him, Fei Bai Pig's entire body trembled as he spat out a mist of blood. Young Master Fei. The white-haired man and the red-robed man were both shocked. Why was it that not only did Fei Bai Pig not kill Ling Han with a single palm strike, he was even slightly injured? However, Fei Bai Pig didn't answer them. He just stood there. The two were shocked. What was going on? However, Ling Han paid no more attention to Fei Bai Pig and strode towards the red-robed man and the white-haired man. There was a seal glowing on his body, and although there was only one, it exuded a domineering aura that suppressed all the heavenly Tao in the world. This was because this was a 1st-grade heavenly venerable seal. What kind of heavenly venerable seal is this? It's too terrifying. It seems to have surpassed everything. The red-robed man and the white-haired man cried out in surprise. They even forgot to be concerned about Fei Bai Pig's current situation. Ling Han let out a long cry and punched out. Boundless power surged, and the nearby mountain peaks collapsed one by one, while the sky trembled violently, collapsing in large patches. Only then did the red-robed man and the white-haired man become horrified. Previously, they were only shocked that Ling Han could stand against Fei Bai Pig, but now that they were personally facing Ling Han, they finally understood what kind of pressure this was. They hurriedly released their strongest battle prowess and went forth to meet Ling Han's attack. Pung! However, with only a single strike, they felt as if they had suffered a terrifying blow, and all the veins and bones in their bodies were instantly broken apart. They were shocked. A 2nd tier had dealt them such a heavy blow with just one punch, and they had completely lost any ability to continue fighting. Was he still human? Ling Han was astounded. They actually didn't die? In his opinion, these two people should have died with a single punch. Boom. In response to this, Fei Bai Pig's body suddenly exploded, turning into an endless rain of blood. He had been killed by Ling Han in a single strike, and had only exploded at this moment. Logo. This is the end of Part 1. Chapter 2889, 2889 3rd Tier. Chapter 2889, 2889 3rd Tier. 2889 3rd Tier. The The red-robed man and the white-haired man felt a chill rise from the bottom of their hearts and straight into their heads. Cold sweat trickled down their foreheads. How could they not be afraid? Fei Bai Pig had just died in front of them, and they didn't want to share his fate as well. "Are you feeling any regrets?" Ling Han asked. The two of them hurriedly nodded. Right now, they had already completely lost their battle prowess, and even a first tier could easily kill them. "All right, then you two can go to your afterlife now." Ling Han threw another punch. Pung pung. The two of them instantly turned into a rain of blood, just as Fei Bai Pig had. The resentment of the two heavenly venerates floated in the air. They had clearly already begged for mercy, so why had Ling Han still killed them? However, Ling Han was completely unconcerned. They dared to attack his wives. So what if they even knelt down and kowtowed 100 times? He would still kill them without a doubt. Boom. A large amount of life essence surged into Ling Han's body. These were 3 4th-tier heavenly venerates. Ling Han merely glanced at the 2 3rd tiers and didn't make a move. He directly sat down cross-legged and refined the life essence in his body. He didn't want to make another move. The life essence of 3 4th tiers was already enough to make him feel slightly stuffed, and 2 more 3rd tiers would definitely make it even more unbearable. However, the Empress and Hu Niu would not let the two of them go. They both dashed out, throwing punches and kicks at the same time. The 2 3rd tiers were practically scared to death. Just now, there were 3 4th tiers, yet they were all dealt with by Ling Han with 3 consecutive punches, 1 each. What kind of terrifying power was this? Seeing the Empress and Hu Niu charging over, how could they still have any thoughts of fighting? They hurriedly fled. However, just what kind of strength did the Empress and Hu Niu possess? In a battle of equal cultivation level, it was easy for heavenly venerates to escape, but Hu Niu was a 4th tier. How could these two easily escape? After one person was stopped by Hu Niu, the Empress immediately rushed up to fight, while Hu Niu chased after the other person. The two women's teamwork could be considered perfect and tacit. With just this little bit of delay, the other 3rd tier had already fled without a trace. "He escaped," Hu Niu said in slight disappointment. Turning around, she joined forces with the Empress to suppress the other 3rd tier. Even if it was just the Empress, that 3rd tier was no match for her. So how could he possibly be a match for the combined might of the two women? Very quickly, he was blasted into smithereens. Ling Han grunted. Even if he hadn't killed this 3rd tier with his own hands, the life essence of this 3rd tier was similarly drawn to him, surging into his body and turning into nutrition for him. He had already eaten enough. Another 3rd tier would naturally make him feel extremely uncomfortable. However, he had already refined a few great herbs previously, and with the life essence of these 4 heavenly venerates, he should be able to break through. Come. The powers of dimension in his body were all channeled at the same time, crushing the life essence like a millstone and turning it into particles that nourished the powers of dimension in every cell of his body. The life essence of the 4 heavenly venerates was incomparably powerful, but after being divided among so many powers of dimension, it was actually not much. It could only allow Ling Han's cultivation level to advance by a little bit, but he had originally only been a little bit away. He was at the peak of 2nd tier, the true pinnacle. Ling Han began to break through to the 3rd tier. Actually, breaking through to the 2nd tier, 3rd tier, and 4th tier wasn't difficult at all. What was needed was only one thing, and that was to communicate with another fundamental power of the Genesis world, and use it to temper and strengthen oneself. There was a huge difference between one more and one less. Ling Han had already mastered the void particle. Now, he had to communicate with one of these fundamental powers: mesotron particle, receive particle, rainbow particle, constant particle, or quark particle. There was no difference between the 6 types of energy, but an additional power to form a combination would produce completely different might. Theoretically speaking, although the void was filled with 6 types of fundamental particles, they were too violent and would form energy storms at the drop of a hat. Even heavenly venerates would avoid them, so how could they possibly communicate? However, this place was different. After all, it was a dimension. Although it had long since died, the environment wasn't that violent, after all. Though the friction and collision of the fundamental particles here had turned into terrifying flames that could easily burn even a ninth heaven. Ling Han continued to experiment. There was only one type of fundamental power in his body, and it was not too repulsive to other fundamental powers. Breaking through should not be too difficult. "Husband, let's leave this place first," the Empress said. They had killed Fei Bai Pig, as well as 2 other 4th tiers and 1 3rd tier. It would be strange if Fei Bai Pig's father could endure this. He would definitely attack them soon. Ling Han nodded. Breaking through wasn't something that could be done in a short period of time, so he'd better find another place to take his time. He grabbed the 2 women and took a step forward, instantly leaving an endless distance behind him. After running far enough, Ling Han released the 2 women, and he continued to charge towards the 3rd tier. To his surprise, this breakthrough was extremely slow. 100 million years had passed, but there was still no movement. It was as if the other 5 fundamental powers despised him and didn't communicate with him at all. The Empress and Hunyo were already impatient from the long wait. They were searching here. Now was a great opportunity to obtain raw stones. If they missed this period of time, a large number of people would flood in, and another intense fight would be inevitable. In fact, there were already people heading underground. Since a 3rd dimension had appeared, it was possible for a 4th, 5th, and 100th dimension to appear. Ling Han forgot everything. He was comprehending Tao in this world, and his divine sense spread out like a vast ocean. Even though his cultivation level hadn't increased in recent years, his battle prowess had been constantly rising. Why was this so? He indeed didn't sense a second fundamental particle, but each cell was equivalent to an individual dimension that could grow continuously. There was no end to this growth. Even if he harvested the power of dimension from a low-level dimension, it wasn't impossible for it to become a transcendent dimension in the future after his nurturing. However, the energy required to do so would definitely be extremely terrifying. Perhaps he would never see the day it happened, because even if he emptied the entire Genesis world, there wouldn't be enough energy. However, it was not completely impossible, because there was still the existence of the void. There was no matter there, and all it contained were fundamental particles. There was an endless amount of them, and perhaps they could support Ling Han's growth until he reached his limits. After 100 million years, his powers of dimension had naturally improved significantly. Thus, even though he hadn't broken through yet, he wasn't worried. After all, his efforts weren't in vain. 200 million years, 300 million years, 500 million years. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, 1 billion years had passed. Ling Han finally sensed another fundamental power, the constant particle. However, sensing it was one thing. Whether or not he could guide it over and use it for himself was another matter. Another 300 million years passed in the blink of an eye. Ling Han finally extracted the constant particle energy. For the first time, it flowed through his body, showing that he had officially stepped into the 3rd tier. He couldn't help but feel rueful. Those like Lin Yulian and Xin Qihu had only used 1 billion years to step into the 4th tier, but he had spent more than 1 billion years just to break through to the 3rd tier. They really couldn't be compared. However, he wasn't dissatisfied in the slightest, because while his advancement was slow, his battle prowess was simply too strong. Chapter 2890, 2890 Desiring to Test Battle Prowess. Chapter 2890, 2890 Desiring to Test Battle Prowess. 2890 Desiring to Test Battle Prowess. Ling Han's progress was slow, but that depended on whom he was being compared with. How many people were capable of breaking through to the 3rd tier in just 1 billion years? In terms of natural talent and cultivation, Ling Han admitted that he was not the best, but his opportunities and fortunes had surpassed anyone's. For example, could there be a second person who could accommodate the powers of dimension of the whole Genesis world inside his body? With high natural talent, their progress was slightly faster. However, even when it came to the likes of Lin Yulian, the greatest prodigy of all eternity, wasn't she still stuck at the 4th tier? Moreover, even if they could cross over to the next threshold now, The 6th tier and 7th tier were both huge hurdles, and the time required would be even longer. Furthermore, the 7th tier was the end of the line. If Ling Han could also cross over to the 7th tier, who could rival him? Perhaps he would already be invincible upon reaching the 6th tier. After breaking through to the 3rd tier, heavenly tribulation naturally descended on Ling Han, but he ignored it. This little barrage couldn't even be considered as a massage for him. He guided the constant particles, continuously tempering his body with them from within, and strengthening his cultivation of the 3rd tier. Otherwise, having just broken through, it would be impossible to increase his battle prowess. Ling Han took out the single remaining great herb and swallowed it all in a few mouthfuls. He had just broken through and needed the great herb to build his foundations. Even with the help of a great herb, Ling Han still spent another 100 million years to completely stabilize his cultivation level at the 3rd tier. It couldn't be helped. He had too many powers of dimension in his body. A great herb was simply a drop in the bucket. At the same time, when he advanced to the 3rd tier, a heavenly venerable seal appeared within his body automatically. It was still incomplete, but the power boost had shockingly reached more than 40 times. If it was complete, how many times could power be enhanced? While stabilizing his cultivation level, Ling Han was also repairing this seal. There were millions and millions of powers of dimension circulating within his body, which actually gave rise to a miraculous effect, nourishing this seal and making it more complete. The power of dimension actually has such an effect? Ling Han was puzzled at first, but then came to a sudden realization. He himself was an equivalent of the Genesis world, so why couldn't he nurture the heavenly venerable seals? A complete 3rd tier seal was a 4th grade seal, which would give a boost of power by a total of 64 times. What level has my current battle prowess reached? Ling Han muttered to himself. Can I surpass the 5th tier? If it was possible, then he was truly too terrifying. 5th tier would completely crush 4th tier, and the gap between these two cultivation levels was simply too great. Moreover, Ling Han was now only in the early stage of the 3rd tier. If he possessed the battle prowess of a 5th tier, then that would truly be incredible. Take the Empress, for example. The higher her cultivation level, the weaker her battle prowess. For example, she was currently in the early stage of the 3rd tier, but her battle prowess was only at the peak stage of the 3rd tier, yet to even break through to the 4th tier. It was different with Ling Han. The powers of dimension in his body were all alive, and their growth rate was too terrifying. I really want to find someone to spar with. Ling Han stood up and took a step forward, chasing after the Empress and Hun Yo. He had left his power of dimension on the two women. As long as he sensed them, he would be able to find them no matter how far away they were. To his surprise, the two women were no longer on this level. Instead, they had gone further downward again. He didn't stay here for long and followed them underground. Deep underground, he immediately discovered that the fundamental particles here were even denser. The pressure of the dimensional layers seemed to create a huge pressure, causing the fundamental particles to become extremely packed. Here, the collision of fundamental particles was undoubtedly even more intense. Terrifying flames spread everywhere. To say nothing of ninth heaven celestial kings, even first-tier heavenly venerates didn't dare to force their way in, or else they would be easily incinerated. If there were still a few more dimensions overlapped, would anyone be able to go there? With this thought in mind, Ling Han easily charged through. With his current battle prowess of the 5th tier, this was naturally not a big deal for him. Soon, he broke through the ground layer and entered the 4th dimension. He followed the tracks of the two women. A few days later, his figure landed. The Empress and Hun Yo were currently together with many other people. He had no idea what they were talking about, but the atmosphere seemed to be extremely tense. Ling Han immediately said, "Is there going to be a fight? That's great." The Empress couldn't help but be rendered speechless. Why did this guy only think about fighting all day long? Hun Yo, on the other hand, said, "No, we were just discussing whether we should enter a cave, not planning to get into a fight." Ling Han couldn't help but feel disappointed. Oh, so there's no fight. He still wanted to fight against a 5th tier in order to test his battle prowess. However, even if there was a conflict here, there wasn't any fifth tier to battle with. Those here were all fourth tiers. With Ling Han's presence, the Empress and Hu Niu naturally became bolder. They strongly advocated entering the cave for exploration. Some chose to retreat, while others chose to enter. In the end, they discovered an astonishingly valuable raw stone mine in the cave. Everyone who entered made a fortune. Ling Han had the special ability to see stones, so the three of them naturally earned the most. There were nearly 30 great herbs and 7 heavenly venerable seals, which made the three of them very happy. They left in search of new veins of ore. It was truly interesting. In the past, when Ling Han was still at second tier and did not want to encounter any fifth tier, he would always meet such an elite, or at least meet a descendant of a fifth tier, and both sides would inevitably become enemies. However, now that he wasn't afraid of fifth tier, and was in fact wanting to find one to fight with, all the fifth tier elites seemed to have disappeared in an instant. It wasn't just them. Even their descendants seemed to have all vanished. This made Ling Han extremely depressed, and even his spirit became sluggish. Several years later, they found a new vein of ore. Just as they were mining it, a group of people appeared. "This place belongs to us now. If you don't want to die, scram." There were a total of 12 people in this group, and all of them were heavenly Venerates. Those who could appear here now were at least second tiers, as it was already impossible for first tiers to come here. Hearing this, Ling Han was not angry, but delighted instead. He sized up these 12 people, but was greatly disappointed because all these 12 people were actually only at the second tier. He held onto a sliver of hope and said, "Looking at how arrogant all of you are, is there a fifth tier senior backing you?" The 12 people on the other side looked at each other. What was going on? Was this guy so scared that he directly asked about their background? These people laughed loudly. As long as one could become a heavenly Venerates, which one wasn't a naturally talented genius, proud to the core? Who would be like this, cowering in an instant? "Now that you know we're not to be trifled with, hurry up and scram," these people all shouted at Ling Han. Ling Han broke into a smile and charged forwards to unleash a barrage of punches and kicks. Pong, pong, pong. What sort of strength did he possess? After a series of chaotic attacks, the 12 people all let out blood-curdling screams. Their limbs were broken, and they were in an extremely miserable state. These people were both shocked and furious. Ling Han laughed out loud and said, "Quickly go back and call your lord over. I'll wait here." Those people were both furious and shocked. Wasn't this guy a coward? Why did he suddenly become so fierce? However, they knew that they were far from being Ling Han's match, so they all fled quickly, afraid that they would be blasted into pieces by Ling Han if they said another word. Watching these 12 people leave, Ling Han rubbed his hands together, appearing rather excited. "Is that necessary?" the Empress asked with a knowing smile. Ling Han smiled and said, "I have nothing better to do anyway." Although he said that, the anticipation in his eyes had already betrayed him. After almost a day, Ling Han finally saw the return of those 12 people. His gaze swept over them, and he couldn't help but reveal an expression of disappointment. Although these 12 people had brought reinforcements consisting of 5 people, these 5 people were all merely 4th tiers. What happened to the 5th tier he was expecting? Chapter 2891, 2891, Chapter 2893, White Flames, Heavenly Venerate. Chapter 2891, 2891, Chapter 2893, White Flames, Heavenly Venerate. 2891, Chapter 2893, White Flames, Heavenly Venerate. Ling Han glanced around the surroundings. The promised 5th tier was nowhere to be seen, but he did see someone else. The White Flames, Heavenly Venerate. Back when Ling Han had obtained the 9th seal in the overlapping space of Realm Battlefield, he had had to escape to Ling City soon after as the dimension had immediately crumbled. However, he had been quickly surrounded and hunted down by a group of Heavenly Venerates, one of whom had been the White Flames, Heavenly Venerate. Back then, Ling Han had simply said one thing, "I'll remember you." However, Ling Han had been only at the 1st tier at the time. and couldn't have competed with someone at the 4th tier. Once he had reached the 2nd tier, given the vastness of the world, he had had trouble locating the White Flame's heavenly Venerate. Not to mention, he had had so much going on that he had completely forgotten about the matter. He had never thought that he would bump into the White Flame's heavenly Venerate here. Ling Han couldn't help but smile. I've been waiting for you all. However, all of you are only 4th tiers. That's not nearly enough for me to be satisfied. Insolent boy, remarked an old man in red robes. As a 4th tier, he didn't think a 3rd tier was worth his attention. Naturally, he assumed that Ling Han was simply courting death. Haha, it's little wonder that he would be so brash seeing as there's a 4th tier backing him up, said another youth in purple robes. While his appearance was young, he had actually lived countless epochs and was also at the 4th tier. As he said that, he looked towards Hunyeo. As a heavenly Venerate of the same level, he could tell the latter's cultivation at a glance. The White Flame's heavenly Venerate was more cautious, however, and said, "Everyone, don't underestimate this youngster. He's Ling Han." Ling Han? The rest of the 4th tier, heavenly Venerates revealed a look of surprise. It seemed that they had heard of this name before. The purple-robed 4th tier clasped his hands suddenly and said, "Is he that Ling Han? The kid who set a new record in the realm battlefield?" At the time, Ling Han had been merely at the 1st tier. Naturally, he seemed like a child to him. The rest of them were equally astonished. It had only been a few million years, and for one to rise from 1st tier to 3rd tier in that short amount of time was simply too shocking of a growth speed. They soon started having second thoughts. Was it worth it to court the resentment of a rising star with limitless potential for the sake of a single vein of ore? Even if they could suppress Ling Han now, what about 10 million or even 100 million years later? Once Ling Han became a 5th tier, wouldn't their positions be completely reversed? Fortunately for them, it was highly difficult for a 4th tier to break through to the 5th tier. Even people like Lin Yulian and Xin Qihu were still stuck in the 4th tier after spending over an epoch trying. This proved how difficult it was to cross that gap. If the 3 greatest prodigies had it so tough, then what more of Ling Han? How could he possibly compare to them? As such, they were simply considering if they should be courteous towards this future powerhouse. They still believed that they had the upper hand and could make the first move. Ling Han, your performance in the realm battlefield was astounding. On account of this, we are willing to let you have this or vein, said the red-robed 4th tier. He then continued, however, these youngsters were all beaten up by you. We'll let this matter go if you apologize. In his eyes, this was being more than courteous enough towards Ling Han, and it was merely on account of his potential growth. Had it been any other 3rd tier, he would have suppressed them long ago and would not have been so polite. Ling Han smiled. First off, we found this or vein to begin with, and we're already in the midst of mining it. What you're doing is robbery. Where did you get the idea that you were letting me have it? Secondly, those people insulted us, so I was simply teaching them a lesson. They're lucky enough I didn't kill them. The purple-robed 4th tier glared. So you don't want to apologize then? Ling Han paid him no heed. He turned to look at the White Flame's heavenly Venerate and said, Little White, I remember I told you before that I'd come find you, didn't I? Little White. The White Flame's heavenly Venerate couldn't help but raise an eyebrow as he felt an urge to fight. However, he knew what a monster Ling Han was, being able to fight 3rd tiers back when he had been at the 1st tier. Even though it was less likely to be able to fight against someone on a higher level the more one's strength increased, this kid should still be able to fight 4th tiers as a 3rd tier. Hence, he suppressed his impulse as he wasn't entirely sure he could win against Ling Han one-on-one. He needed to get the rest to band together with him at least. The White Flame smiled. I've seen plenty of small fry like you. How could I possibly remember everything they say? Previously, he hadn't thought Ling Han would have amounted to anything at all. Little had he expected that Ling Han would have progressed to the 3rd tier and become an existence that could threaten him within a mere few million years. Ling Han laughed. Then let's clear our old debts today. Young man, you are too cocky, scoffed a blue-robed 4th tier. He was completely annoyed by Ling Han's behavior. Within heavenly venerable tier, hierarchy was extremely strict. No one would be as arrogant as Ling Han. He was right. As long as one was a heavenly Venerate, one stood at the pinnacle of the realm. Even if a first tier were to meet a seventh tier, all they needed to do was cup their hands and greet respectfully. However, this was no indication that a first tier would be able to act cocky in front of a seventh tier. As such, Ling Han's cocky attitude had ignited a fury in all of them. He was merely a third tier. Ling Han raised his shoulders and said, "Cocky, am I? That's just because I have the strength to back it up." The purple-robed fourth tier was utterly speechless. Where did this brat get the audacity to speak such insolent things? It seems a peaceful resolution is out of the picture, the White Flame's heavenly Venerate said coldly. He was not surprised at this turn of events. Back when Ling Han had still been a first tier, he had been just as arrogant in front of an even larger number of fourth tiers. As such, the White Flames didn't find it strange that things would turn out like this. "Ling Han, don't waste your breath on them. Let's fight." Hunyo chimed in, being the battle maniac that she was. She opened her little mouth to reveal two sharp canines. Ling Han looked towards the White Flame's heavenly Venerate and said, "Little White, are you brave enough to fight me? I won't be too hard on you. I'll use only one hand." To a heavenly Venerate, there was no difference between using both hands or a single finger. However, Ling Han's words were clearly meant to provoke, and the White Flame's heavenly Venerate's expression quickly turned dark. No matter how much of a monster Ling Han was, the mere act of a third tier mocking him made him very upset. "Humph, let me teach you some manners." The purple-robed fourth tier struck out and tried to suppress Ling Han. To him, Ling Han was nothing but a mere third tier. No matter how legendary the rumors made him out to be, there was no way he could compete against a fourth tier. Ling Han shook his head, and then waved his left hand towards the purple-robed fourth tier. Pong! A loud noise resounded, and the surrounding mountains crumbled one after another. Even the skies were quaking under the terrifying force. The purple-robed fourth tier couldn't stop himself from falling backwards, finally coming to a halt after a dozen steps. However, to a heavenly Venerate, a simple step was sufficient to cross a considerable distance, and the purple-robed fourth tier soon vanished from sight. Coming back as quickly as he had retreated, the purple-robed fourth tier soon reappeared using a few steps. He was shocked to see that Ling Han had not moved a single inch. It was as though their roles were reversed, and Ling Han was the fourth tier. Chapter 2892. 2892 You know Young Master Fei? Chapter 2892. 2892 You know Young Master Fei? 2892 You know Young Master Fei? Even the White Flame's heavenly Venerate didn't expect such an outcome, and turned pale with shock. In a battle of a third tier against fourth tier, Ling Han actually still gained the upper hand. They had to be seeing things. The purple-robed fourth tier took a deep breath. "So you're freakish to this extent. Not bad, not bad. Previously, it was indeed our juniors who were blind and only asking to be humiliated." Ling Han possessed the battle prowess of a fourth tier, which meant that he was a fourth tier heavenly Venerate. If a third tier was disrespectful towards him, he would have deserved a beating, just like how Ling Han was disrespectful to him just now, and how he hadn't even hesitated to suppress him. However, it would be less easy to resolve the matter now, he said calmly, but his tone was filled with killing intent. How could he endure public humiliation like this, as if a fourth tier like him was actually no match for a third tier? Wong, a blurry seal appeared on his forehead. His entire body also emitted a silver glow, and his aura surged. With the enhancement of the heavenly venerable seal, his battle prowess instantly increased by more than 10 times. It was an 8th grade seal. Although it was only an 8th grade seal, heavenly venerable seals were rare, and most of the heavenly venerable seals contained in raw stones were of the 9th grade. As such, 8th grade seals were very, very extraordinary. He roared again. The spot between his brows split open, and a precious tower flew out. It had a total of 18 levels, and every level seemed like crystal, emanating the air of primal chaos. With a loud roar, He controlled the precious tower to make it descend down towards Ling Han. The precious tower spun gently and enlarged continuously. As the air of primal chaos descended, it seemed to be even heavier than a whole dimension. This was not impossible, because it had been forged by a fourth tier, so it was definitely no difficult task for it to destroy a low-level dimension with a single strike. Ling Han smiled faintly and pointed a finger. Pong! He was so nonchalant, but the purple-robed fourth tier's precious tower immediately flew backwards, and his entire body was knocked back. This time, everyone's expression didn't change. Instead, they were shocked to the core. Not only did the purple-robed fourth tier use a heavenly venerable seal, but he also took out a heavenly venerate tool and activated it with a secret technique. It could be said that he had fully unleashed his abilities. But how did Ling Han respond? He had only casually pointed out a finger, and the purple-robed fourth tier's precious tool had already flown out of his hands, and his body had been sent flying. What kind of enormous difference in strength was this? If Ling Han had been in the fourth tier, and the purple-robed man was in the third tier, this result would have been acceptable to everyone. Are you still continuing? Ling Han said to the purple-robed fourth tier. The latter had already run back for the second time. Ling Han had shown mercy. He had only sent the other party flying, but had not seriously injured him. The purple-robed fourth tier gritted his teeth, but he couldn't say anything. What could he say? A fourth tier couldn't even crush a third tier, yet he was easily defeated when he went all out. How could he still have the face to say anything? However, he was still defiant. He felt that there was a limit to how much stronger Ling Han was compared to him. After all, he had not been injured either time. Most importantly, Ling Han's attitude was too displeasing. It was as if Purple Robe wasn't a heavenly venerate, but just a random passerby. Young man, you are indeed freakish, and your battle prowess is astonishing. The blue-robed fourth tier stepped forward. However, being overly hard would make it easy to break. You are too arrogant, and it is unavoidable that you will offend many people. Moreover, have you heard of a saying? He paused for a moment. 2 fists are no match for 4 hands won. Ling Han laughed loudly and wagged his finger. I've only heard of this saying, a lion enters a flock of sheep too. In other words, you're a bunch of trash. No matter how many of you there are, it's useless. I can suppress all of you single-handedly. Being ridiculed by him in this manner, the 5 fourth tiers, including the White Flame's heavenly venerate, revealed extremely furious expressions. Too arrogant, too arrogant. Young man, it's not a good thing to be too flashy, the White Flame's heavenly venerate said calmly. Today, I'll teach you a good lesson. The 5 fourth tiers all walked out together. Boom. They each channeled a heavenly venerable seal, and primal chaos chi poured out from their pores, and they transformed into 5 gods. Any one of them could suppress the heavens with a single hand. Ling Han didn't mind. His current target was already placed at the 5th tier. As for 4th tiers, to say nothing of 5, even 100 of them might not be enough. Die! The 5 heavenly venerates attacked in unison, suppressing Ling Han. This was an incomparably terrifying power, enough to make any 4th tier's expression change and force them to retreat. Ling Han stretched out his finger again and casually pointed out. Pong! The 5 heavenly venerates immediately scattered as if flowers, completely unable to withstand a single blow. Pa, pa, pa. The White Flame's heavenly venerate and the others fell to the ground one after another. This time, Ling Han had used a lot of strength, causing all of them to cough up blood continuously. Those 3rd tiers and 2nd tiers all opened their mouths wide, and their eyes widened. How was this possible? How could they believe this? 5 4th tier elites were crushed like dried weeds, as if their opponent was not a 3rd tier elite, but a 5th tier elite. 5th tier. They looked at Ling Han, and their bodies couldn't help but tremble. Could it be that this person had tier-surpassing battle prowess of 2 cultivation levels? However, advancing from the 4th tier to the 5th tier was a huge leap. There were very few people in the world who possessed 5th tier battle prowess at 4th tier. Not to mention that Ling Han was only a third tier. Monster. An absolute monster. Ling Han looked at the white flames, heavenly Venerate. I told you that I would remember you. One day, I'd settle scores with you, right? The white flame's heavenly Venerate's heart was in utter despair. This freakish person was definitely not human. He could possess the power of 5th tier at 3rd tier. He said dejectedly, "That's right." "All right." Ling Han threw a punch. Pong! The white flame's heavenly Venerate was immediately blasted apart. Back then, the other man had charged to their doors, wanting to kill Ling Han and extract the heavenly venerable seals from him, and did not give him a way out, either. What right did he have now to ask Ling Han to show mercy? Naturally, Ling Han had to kill him. Ling Han then looked at the other 4 4th tiers. As his gaze swept over them, their bodies trembled involuntarily. "Sir, we are from the Xuanwu Alliance," the purple-robed 4th tier said. At this time, he could only use his background to intimidate and scare Ling Han. Xuanwu Alliance? Ling Han was astounded. Previously, it was he who had killed members of the Xuanwu Alliance, which meant that he did not even manage to participate in the fight for the last most valuable vein of ore. He could only retreat and find a place to enter into seclusion for his breakthrough. Unexpectedly, as the saying went, destiny will make enemies meet. They met people from the Xuanwu Alliance here. The Xuanwu Alliance was a 5th tier force. Although it was still slightly inferior to a 6th tier force, there were only about 100 6th tier forces in the world, and a 5th tier force was already quite strong. Seeing that Ling Han was hesitating, the purple-robed 4th tier and the others all revealed excited expressions, seeing a glimmer of hope. Ling Han chuckled and said, "What rank is Fei Baiju's father in the Xuanwu Alliance?" "Lord Fei Wu." The purple-robed 4th tier was stunned. He did not expect Ling Han to actually mention Fei Baiju and his old man, but the hope in his heart became even stronger. It would be even better if the two of them had a friendship. It was Lord Fei Wu and Lord Qi Xian who established the Xuanwu Alliance together, and he is one of the 2 alliance leaders. He couldn't help but ask, "Sir, do you know Young Master Fei?" He didn't dare to say that Fei Baiju was already dead, as he was afraid that Ling Han wouldn't admit this friendship because of this. "I know him. Of course I know him," Ling Han said with a smile. "I killed him with my own hands, so how could I not know him? You really like to joke." "Pooh." The purple-robed 4th tier and the others all spluttered. Chapter 2893, 2893, Waiting for Trash. Chapter 2893, 2893, Waiting for Trash. 2893, Waiting for Trash. Ling Han nodded and said, "My cultivation level is increasing, so it's inevitable that I'll have to fight against such an elite. Why don't we fight now?" "Are you confident?" the Empress asked again. Ling Han nodded. Hee. Since Ling Han said he's confident, then he definitely is, Hunyo said laughingly. The 3 of them continued to mine. With a cheat-like grandmaster of raw stone like Ling Han around, their mining speed was astonishingly fast. However, this ore vein specialized in producing great herbs, and not a single heavenly venerable seal could be found, causing Ling Han to feel extremely disappointed. Great herbs aren't bad, either. They can help you improve your cultivation level without falling behind, the Empress consoled him. Ling Han nodded. After he advanced to the 3rd tier, even the life essence of a 4th tier elite was not enough for him. He would absorb it all in a few breaths. If he wanted to feel bloated like before, he would definitely need a 5th tier. However, the raw stones here are almost all mined. Why isn't that trash here yet? Is he really such trash? Another 10 days passed, and the ore vein was completely mined. Ling Han decided to wait for another 10 days for Fei Wu. If Fei Wu still did not come, then he could not be bothered to wait any longer. In any case, there would come a time when they would meet again in the future, and Fei Wu was not the only 5th tier in the world. However, only 7 days later, Fei Wu arrived. An extremely terrifying aura enveloped Ling Han, instantly causing him to come to his senses. He felt as if he was facing Xin Qihu. However, he was no longer the 2nd tier of the past, and his current battle prowess could completely rival that of a 5th tier. I'm here. A leisurely voice rang out. Boom. Even though the voice clearly wasn't loud, the mountains collapsed one after another, and the entire mountain range was flattened in an instant. Of course, heavenly venerates would have this kind of divine might, but, generally speaking, heavenly venerates would control it as there was no need to cause great destruction. This would cause them to be easily targeted by the heaven and earth, and should the collective power of the entire dimension be used to suppress them, even a seventh tier would also suffer. However, this was the void. The dimension had died long ago, so they naturally weren't afraid of being targeted. Furthermore, this person was probably filled with anger as well. Ling Han floated up with a smile, hands behind his back, and said, "So trash is here? You won't benefit at all from being glib-tongued in front of me." A figure appeared. He was extremely short, and upon closer inspection, it was actually a little boy who was only 5 or 6 bu too tall. However, he was bearing an extremely mature expression. Ling Han was astounded. "I say, trash, you merely have a terrible name, but there's no need to reform your already grown body, right?" That little boy instantly revealed a furious expression. He was Fei Wu, a dignified 5th-tier heavenly venerate. The reason why he had turned into a little boy was because of a secret technique he had created himself. He continuously repeated the process of being born, growing up, and dying of old age to comprehend his Tao. However, Ling Han was too wicked, actually making fun of his name. "Brother Fei, there's no need to lower yourself to the level of a mere 3rd tier." Another voice rang out, and a slender man appeared by Fei Wu's side. He was handsome and energetic, and whether it was in terms of appearance or bearing, there were no negative points to speak of. This was the other alliance leader of the Xuanwu Alliance, Qixian. He was also a 5th-tier heavenly venerate. Ling Han looked at him and said, "Sissy, what are you talking about?" Qixian couldn't help but be stunned. Sissy? He was a little handsome, but he had nothing to do with being a sissy, okay? How could this brat speak so carelessly and attack so powerfully with his tongue? He's just sharp-tongued. Don't mind him, just suppress him. Fei Wu said. His feet moved, and he was already closing in on Ling Han. He stretched out a hand, and it transformed into a huge mountain. There were seals radiating with light, and there were phenomena of sun, moon, and stars, as if he was opening up a new world. 5th-tier elites were indeed extraordinary, as if they could create a world with a single thought. "Suppress your sister," Ling Han roared, and took the initiative to counter the attack. Pong, pong, pong. The battle between the two great elites was incomparably intense. Qixian couldn't help but reveal a look of surprise, because while Fei Wu had the upper hand, Ling Han wasn't much inferior. He was definitely capable of fighting back. One had to know that Fei Wu was at the middle stage of 5th tier, only slightly inferior to Qixian. Of course, if this continued, there would come a day when Fei Wu would be able to win, but who knew how long that would take? Furthermore, Ling Han could completely escape at any time. With battle prowess on the same level, it would be easy for either of them to leave. Chapter 2894, 2894 Fighting 5th Tier. Chapter 2894, 2894 Fighting 5th Tier. 2894 Fighting 5th Tier. Boom! This punch was incomparably terrifying. Ling Han's figure flashed, dodging this attack, and he calmly said, "In a battle of 5th tier against 3rd tier, you still want to join forces? You have no respect for your elders." "I just want to teach you a lesson," Qixian said nonchalantly. At his level, he no longer cared about what others said. Of course, Ling Han's mouth was especially vicious, and that was another matter. Ling Han shook his head and said, "Seeing the two of you appear together, I guess that you would definitely join forces with your shamelessness. Otherwise, why would you have come?" Qixian paid Ling Han no regard at all. He threw another punch. "Ling Han, why don't you dare to face it head-on?" Fei Wu also flew over and attacked with all his might. "Weren't you very arrogant?" Ling Han was also a little speechless and said, "The two of you, both 5th tiers, joined forces to attack me, and you still want me to face you head-on? Although I've already expected your shamelessness, I still didn't expect you to be shameless to this extent. The two great 5th-tier heavenly venerates acted as if they hadn't heard anything. No matter what Ling Han said, as long as they killed him, he naturally would become quiet. However, to kill me, do you guys think that is possible? Ling Han asked calmly. Hong. The answer to his question came in the form of violent attacks unleashed by two great heavenly venerates. Ling Han let out a long cry, and the heavenly venerable sea he had used before immediately dimmed. Replacing it was the only first-grade seal he had mastered. Instantly, his battle prowess increased by more than 40 times. Pong, pong, pong. He sent Fei Wu and Qi Xian flying with 3 punches and 2 kicks. In terms of power, he absolutely suppressed them. This time, Fei Wu's and Qi Xian's eyes widened as if they had seen a ghost. In the face of such power, they were like children who were facing an adult. They were completely powerless. What kind of heavenly venerable seal is this? It can actually produce such a terrifying enhancement of power? They both asked with trembling voices. It increased by at least 70 times. No, it should have reached 80 times. This is a first-grade seal. Their eyes lit up in surprise and delight. Chapter 2895, 2895 Killing Fei Wu. Chapter 2895, 2895 Killing Fei Wu. 2895 Killing Fei Wu. First-grade seal. Heavenly venerable seals were rare, and only the more widely known had appeared in the world. Otherwise, when Ling Han had obtained a 7th-grade heavenly venerable seal in the realm battlefield, it would have been impossible for so many heavenly venerate to come knocking on his door to demand it. One could imagine how astonishing a first-grade seal was. It would greatly increase the strength of a heavenly venerate, to say nothing of the fact that a 5th-tier heavenly venerate would go crazy over it. Even a 7th tier would be envious. A junior like you can really give people a surprise, Qi Xian said with a smile. In his opinion, even if Ling Han possessed a first-grade seal, it would not be enough to strike fear in him, because if he and Fei Wu joined forces, they could completely stop Ling Han. At most, they would only be at a disadvantage. Worst came to worst, they would definitely be able to endure it for 2 hours. He didn't believe that Ling Han still had a second first-grade heavenly venerable seal. Oh! Ling Han smiled faintly. Surprise? I thought you were going to say shock. Haha, you can't even imagine the trials and tribulations I've gone through in my life. Do you think you can scare me with just this? Qi Xian said coldly, appearing extremely disdainful. He was a supreme elite of the 5th tier. Which of those who could reach this level wasn't a supreme elite of the world? Fei Wu stood at the sidelines and didn't rush him. Ling Han was still channeling this first-grade seal, so they were naturally happy for Ling Han to exhaust the energy of this seal for nothing. It would be best if they could stall for 2 hours like this. Then, he and Qi Xian would be able to easily take Ling Han's head, and it was not just a single heavenly venerable seal they would obtain from him. At this moment, he was already thinking about how he could snatch that first-grade seal. It was too precious. Ling Han was not in a hurry either. The first-grade seal was his trump card. Wrong. Qi Xian actually dared to say that it was a surprise? He would let the other party know that this was definitely a shock and a nightmare. He stopped channeling the heavenly venerable seal in his body. They wanted him to waste the power for nothing? He wasn't stupid. Seeing this, Qi Xian and Fei Wu both frowned. It seemed that they could only fight and force Ling Han to use all of his ultimate moves. After exhausting this first-grade seal, Ling Han finally could only be at their mercy. The two of them originally had their own intentions, thinking about how they could obtain that first-grade seal after Ling Han's death. However, they had yet to deal with Ling Han, so it was still too early to think about these things. Take this brat down. All right. The two of them set aside their petty schemes and charged towards Ling Han. They channeled their heavenly venerable seals and unleashed all their secret techniques, attacking Ling Han without holding anything back. Ling Han let out a long cry and once again channeled that first-grade seal, clashing with the two 5th-tier elites. Pong, pong, pong. His strength was invincible. Qi Xian and Fei Wu were like paper figurines in front of him. They were sent flying by his casual punches and kicks. Soon, they were covered in wounds. If this had been any other opponent, they would definitely have already retreated. If they continued to be injured like this, it might affect their foundations and affect their future advancement to a higher cultivation level. But now, they couldn't retreat. Ling Han was only a third tier. Furthermore, the heavenly venerable seal was only effective for a limited time. As long as they could endure Ling Han's wave of dominance, it would be their turn to display their might. With such thoughts in mind, they gritted their teeth and persevered. A first-grade seal was definitely worth the risk. Ling Han naturally knew what they were thinking. Unfortunately, these two people didn't know that Ling Han was already leading them around by the nose. The two elites held on with all their might. Finally, 2 hours had passed. The seal on Ling Han's body quickly dimmed. The energy release had ended, and it could no longer be used. "Brat, your death is here." Qi Xian and Fei Wu both channeled another 6th-grade seal. Their battle prowess was almost unaffected. Ha ha ha, they finally made it to this moment. Ling Han smiled calmly and said, "You guys are celebrating too early. You still don't know who the prey is, do you? Are you trying to say that you still have other trump cards?" Qi Xian said disdainfully. "Don't tell me you have a second first-grade seal?" Fei Wu also laughed. "Open your eyes wide and watch." Ling Han let out a long cry. Wong, wong, wong. Densely packed seals flashed out of his body, and there were at least 100 of them. Qi Xian and Fei Wu were both shocked. They had not expected Ling Han to actually have mastered so many heavenly venerable seals. However, what was the use of having so many? They were not combination seals, so how much power could they unleash? "You are just bluff." Pong! Before Fei Wu could finish speaking, he had already been struck by Ling Han's fist. He raised his fist to meet it, but his arm exploded upon contact with this force. The remaining force did not dissipate, and a hole was instantly blasted into his chest. The cold smile on Qi Xian's face immediately disappeared. What a terrifying power! A single punch had broken through Fei Wu's defense and penetrated through his body. The late stage of the 5th tier, or the peak stage? Ling Han took advantage of his victory to follow up with another series of fists of fury towards Fei Wu. Qi Xian hurriedly made his move, wanting to exert pressure for Ling Han so that Fei Wu could catch his breath. However, Ling Han didn't even turn around. With a single punch, Qi Xian was sent flying. All the bones in his body were creaking, and he couldn't stop trembling for a long time, as if he was about to shatter. On the other side, the pressure on Fei Wu was even greater. Ling Han had already closed the distance between them completely, and his fists were firing down on Fei Wu, forcing the latter to raise his hands to block. Otherwise, he would definitely die. However, Ling Han's strength was simply too great. In just 2 or 3 punches, his other arm had also turned into a rain of blood. He gritted his teeth and forcibly regenerated his arms. At the level of heavenly venerable tier, even though one's strength was inconceivably powerful and one's physique was also incomparably tough, one's self-healing ability was actually inferior to that of a celestial king. What was this about? Because heavenly venerates surpassed regulations, celestial medicine was completely ineffective for them. If they wanted to forcefully regrow their lost limbs, there was only one way: use their own blood essence to stimulate the growth. If a heavenly venerate expended a large amount of blood essence, they would also be severely injured. In serious cases, it wouldn't even be strange if their cultivation level dropped. Forget trying to break through to a higher cultivation level. However, Fei Wu had no other choice. If he didn't regenerate his arms, his torso and mind would be the ones to be blown apart. If one died, everything would be for naught. Pong, pong, pong. His arms continued to regenerate, and then to be continuously blown apart. This seemed to allow him to struggle at death's door, but Ling Han's strength was truly too terrifying. Not only did he shatter Fei Wu's arms, but the recoil also affected the latter's entire body. Soon, Fei Wu was vomiting blood repeatedly, and his resistance became weaker and weaker. Ling Han. Qi Xian charged over from a distance. He had been punched by Ling Han, and it was only now that he managed to suppress the boiling in his body and charge back. Ling Han ignored him, and his punches became more and more violent. Pong, 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 pong. Fei Wu finally couldn't keep up with his rhythm and was blasted into bits. A fifth-tier elite had fallen. Qi Xian was already closing in. Upon seeing this, he turned around and left without hesitation. Chapter 2896, 2896 Drawing Fire. Chapter 2896, 2896 Drawing Fire. 2896 Drawing Fire. In terms of conventional battle prowess, Qi Xian believed that he could crush Ling Han. However, that could not hold up against the fact that Ling Han possessed astonishing combination seals. Those were too terrifying, and were enough to increase Ling Han's strength by more than 200 times. As a late-stage fifth tier, he could only concede defeat. Was it not clear that Fei Wu had already been blasted into bits by Ling Han's punch? If Qi Xian stubbornly continued to resist, he would only be blasted into pieces by Ling Han. However, if he didn't exhaust Ling Han's set of combination seals, wouldn't that mean that he would never be a match for Ling Han? Only by inviting at least 3 to 4 fifth tiers to engage in consecutive battles against Ling Han would Ling Han's strength be beaten back to its original state after 2 hours. Qi Xian didn't believe that Ling Han could still possess a second set of combination seals. The problem was that if they forcefully faced off against the current Ling Han, then even a fifth tier would be blasted into smithereens. Who would be willing to sacrifice themselves for others? There was no such fool in the world. Qi Xian ran as fast as he could, but countless thoughts were already rushing through his mind. In the end, he decided to borrow the hand of another to kill Ling Han. Whether it was that first-grade seal or the even more shocking combination seals, he wanted them all. Ling Han didn't pursue Qi Xian for too long. The two of them could be considered to be of the same cultivation level now. Even if there was a disparity in strength, if one of them wanted to leave, the other person simply wouldn't be able to catch up. It was a bit of a pity, but Ling Han did not take it to heart. He had an invincible heart, and he would become stronger with every passing day. Now, he was no longer afraid of Qi Xian, and he certainly would not be in the future. Ling Han first refined Fei Wu's life essence. Although Fei Wu's name was trash, the life essence in his body was exuberant to the extreme and shockingly dense. Although he was only one person, it was enough to make Ling Han feel bloated. If he were to kill Qi Xian as well, he would definitely feel extremely uncomfortable. As expected of fifth tier, his body had been tempered by 4 types of fundamental powers. It was simply a super great herb. It took some time for Ling Han to completely refine all of this life essence. He stood up and continued to search for new veins of or with the Empress and Hunyou. Every once in a while, they would enter the celestial guest residence and meet with the other women. As a family, they naturally had to be together. In addition, Ling Han also worked hard to increase the number of people with the bloodline of the Ling clan. But even a freakish person like him couldn't rush such things. Tens of thousands to hundreds of millions of years had passed, yet none of the women's stomachs had swelled with pregnancy, making Hunyou cry out at the unfairness of it all. Niu couldn't be bullied like this. This dimension encompassed other dimensions, and it was inevitable that every dimension would be slightly smaller than the previous one. There were differences even among high-level dimensions. Therefore, after hundreds of millions of years of digging, the veins of or on this level were quickly dug clean. Everyone turned their attention to the 5th dimension. Indeed, this dimension existed, but the path downward was even more difficult. Under the intense pressure of the overlapping dimensions, the friction and collision of the fundamental particles had already reached an incomparably terrifying level, and even second tiers could not force their way in. Furthermore, there were even fewer veins of or in the 5th dimension. However, the probability of producing heavenly venerable seals and great herbs was higher, and the profits here weren't any lower than in the previous 4 dimensions. Right at this moment, Ling Han heard a piece of news that was extremely disadvantageous to him. It was said that Ling Han had a 1st-grade seal and even a complete set of 9th-grade seals. When combined, it could erupt with more than 200 times the power. After Ling Han heard this news, his first thought was naturally that it was Qi Xian's doing. Right now, only Qi Xian knew of his big secret. Ling Han only had to think for a moment to know what Qi Xian was up to. This guy wanted to use others to exhaust Ling Han's chance to use the first grade seal and combination seals. Then, he would take the opportunity to kill Ling Han and seize the heavenly venerable seals. This plan was quite clever. However, after thinking about it carefully, it was actually not reliable. Firstly, Ling Han was also at the 5th tier in terms of strength. Even if Qi Xian could gain an advantage in battle prowess, how could he stop Ling Han from escaping? Secondly, there were still 6th tiers in this world. If 6th tiers interfered, would there still be a share for Qi Xian? Of course, Ling Han would not be having a headache on Qi Xian's behalf. He knew that he was about to face the pursuit of many elites. Sure enough, several years later, the trio encountered a group of elites, and the latter directly attacked without saying a word. In the end, Ling Han killed them easily. Mere 4th tiers actually dared to attack him. Obviously, Qi Xian had only said that Ling Han possessed precious heavenly venerable seals, and had not told the truth that, in fact, Ling Han's battle prowess had even reached the 5th tier. If he really said that, then even 5th tier elites would naturally be wary of Ling Han, and it would be impossible for them to move easily. Wouldn't that just be paving the way for others? This was only the beginning. Following that, even more heavenly venerates came looking for Ling Han. Ling Han, a 5th tier elite, appeared. He wore a black robe, and his entire body exuded a faint chill. Hand over the heavenly venerable seals yourself, and you can avoid death. Ling Han looked around and asked, "You're alone?" The black-robed 5th tier couldn't help but be angered to laughter. To suppress a puny 3rd tier like you, how many 5th tiers does it take? Ling Han nodded very seriously and said, "You're right. Looks like you don't intend to be honest and obedient." The black-robed 5th tier cultivator moved to suppress Ling Han. Pong, pong, pong. Ling Han raised his fists to counterattack. He had only boosted himself with a 7th grade seal, but it was enough to suppress his opponent. What? The black-robed 5th tier turned pale with fright. This was something he had not expected at all. Not only could a 3rd tier rival him, he could even in fact suppress him. He hurriedly channeled a heavenly venerable seals as well, and his battle prowess instantly shot up, moving to clash head-on with Ling Han. He was in the middle stage of the 5th tier, and his conventional battle prowess was slightly stronger than Ling Han's. Furthermore, he was channeling a 6th grade seal, and the effect of his power enhancement far exceeded that of a 7th grade seal. Naturally, he instantly reversed the disadvantage and suppressed Ling Han instead. "Do you think I don't have a high-level heavenly venerable seal?" he said coldly, appearing very disdainful. "Is that so?" Ling Han couldn't help but shake his head. The 1st grade seal was already activated. Comparing heavenly venerable seals with me, are you stupid? When the 1st grade seal appeared, it boosted Ling Han's strength by 80 times, so he naturally had the upper hand again. The black-robed 5th tier couldn't help but be speechless. That's right. Didn't he run over to look for Ling Han because the latter had mastered a 1st grade seal, and those even more terrifying combination seals? Now, he was actually competing with him in heavenly venerable seals. Wasn't he just foolish? A look of astonishment appeared on his face. The current Ling Han was already so terrifying. What if he used those combination seals then? Would he die? With this thought in mind, he naturally had the intention to retreat. "You want to leave? It's too late now." Ling Han shook his head. Previously, it was naturally easy for the other party to escape, but now that he was already entangled, it would be strange if he could still escape. Chapter 2897, 2897, Fighting Xin Qihu again. Chapter 2897, 2897, Fighting Xin Qihu again. 2897, Fighting Xin Qihu again. Ling Han no longer held back. He channeled the combination seals, and his power surged once again, reaching a level at which he could completely suppress his opponent. That black-robed 5th tier was unable to withstand it at all, and was violently blasted apart with just over a dozen punches. Large amounts of life essence gushed into Ling Han's body, causing him to shake his head. How could there be someone so stupid? Why did he have to come alone to court death? Thinking about it again, this was normal. Who wouldn't want to monopolize the treasures? However, who would have thought that Ling Han's strength would be so great? It was conceivable that there would be no shortage of such people. In the future, there would be an endless stream of them coming to court death. Sure enough, just over 10 days later, Ling Han was targeted by another 5th tier. He didn't say anything and directly moved to suppress Ling Han. He was extremely domineering. The 5th tier could indeed be so unreasonable, but unfortunately, his opponent was Ling Han. Naturally, there was no need to mention what would happen to him. His only fate was death. In a battle at the same cultivation level, the prerequisite for escaping was that one had to act quickly and not be entangled by the other party. Otherwise, one would only be blasted to pieces with a single strike. Time continued to pass, and more 4th tiers and 5th tiers died in Ling Han's hands. Naturally, people realized that something was wrong. Although Ling Han was a little annoyed, the life essence of a 5th tier elite at this stage was too beneficial for him. After several thousand years, his cultivation had actually advanced to the middle stage of the 3rd tier. This was extremely astonishing progress. If he could continue like this, then Ling Han would only need around 10,000 years to reach the peak stage of the 3rd tier and break through to the 4th tier. Not even Lin Yulyin and Xin Qihu of the past could compare to him. However, how could there be so many good things in the world? Moreover, there were only around 1,000 5th tier, heavenly venerates in total. Was he really going to kill all of them, so that he could increase his cultivation level? The following 5th tiers that made a move on Ling Han afterwards were not so stupid. All of them came in groups. Their numbers would range from as few as 3 or 4 to as many as 6 or 7 of them, which caused Ling Han to have no choice but to feel wary, and he did not dare battle them to the death. He adopted the strategy of roaming around and fighting, and mining raw stones as he ran. After more than 100,000 years, this dimension was almost empty as well. Ling Han decided to head towards the 6th dimension. Although the further down he went, the more difficult it would be, his limit was the 5th tier, so he should be able to go down 2 or 3 more dimensions. The trio set off into the depths of the ground layer. The environment here was even worse, and even 3rd tiers would find it hard to endure. Fortunately, the Empress and Hunyo both had 4th tier battle prowess, and they could still enter the celestial guest residence in the worst case. With the power of the heavenly Venerate tool and Ling Han's protection, it should not be a problem for them to withstand 5th tier attacks. More than 10 years later, they finally arrived at the 6th dimension. At this point, Ling Han was no longer thinking about why the dimensions here could be layered on top of each other, perhaps overlapping endlessly. What kind of power had created this? It was impossible for him to figure it out. Forget it. Let's go find the vein of ore. Undoubtedly, this dimension was even smaller, and it was severely damaged. In many places, one could directly see the void. Terrifying energy storms rushed out, and they could easily strike 2nd tiers to death. One had to be in the 3rd tier to match them. This was also why only 3rd tier elites were qualified for interdimensional travel. However, 3rd tier was only the minimum requirement for interdimensional travel. Some energy storms were formed by a mixture of the 6 fundamental particles, which was equivalent to the blow from a pseudo-7th tier. That was truly terrifying. It should be that even Zhou Hong, Chu Hao, and the other 6th tiers would not dare to face this head-on. What was even more dangerous was that the ground here was too fragile. No one knew which piece of land would suddenly shatter and spew out a terrifying energy storm that would strangle people to death. Ling Han and the others were cautious. So what if Ling Han had 5th tier battle prowess? They did not dare to be careless here. This dimension seemed to have been destroyed, and the degree of destruction was astonishing. It was estimated to be only 1% of the size it used to be. However, dimensions were dimensions, after all. Even a low-level dimension like the Celestial Realm was incomparably huge, and there were still plenty of places to explore. Needless to say, the environment here was extremely dangerous, but the output was also astonishing. Ling Han had already obtained 3 yellow great herb and had even found 2 5th-grade seals. Their value was extremely astonishing. One day, Ling Han suddenly felt a strong throbbing in his heart. He abruptly raised his head to look at the sky, only to see a figure streak across the sky and stand above his head. "I've finally found you," this person said calmly, exuding a domineering aura. "Xin Qihu. This pesky guy." Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "I was just about to challenge you to a battle. You came just in time." "Ha ha ha. Do you think you're qualified to be presumptuous in front of me just because you've advanced to the 3rd tier?" Xin Qihu shook his head. "You're not worthy. You're far from it. When did you become the king of chatter? Come, make your move." Ling Han's fighting spirit was high. His first battle with Xin Qihu had ended with him fleeing in defeat, which made him very displeased. "Humph, you still haven't gotten rid of your bad mouth." Xin Qihu delivered a palm strike. He clearly hadn't used any secret techniques or heavenly venerable seals, but this palm strike was still so overbearing and peerless that even 5th-tier elites would shiver in fear. This was battle prowess at the peak stage of the 5th tier. Now that Ling Han had a direct understanding, he immediately determined Xin Qihu's strength. He was unafraid. He activated a heavenly venerable seal, raising his battle prowess to the peak stage of the 5th tier, and then threw a punch. Pong! The giant palm collided with the fist, forming a mushroom-shaped ball of energy that spread in all directions. Fortunately, the Empress and Hu Niu were currently in the celestial guest residence, so they didn't have to worry about being affected by this power. Otherwise, they would still frown at this even with their cultivation levels. "Heh, after advancing into the 3rd tier, your strength has greatly improved." Xin Qihu sneered. Xiao, his figure descended, and his palms struck out like battle axes, every blow ruthless, forcing Ling Han to have no choice but to use his full strength in order to match him. As expected of the greatest prodigy of all eternity, how powerful. Ling Han had killed even several 5th tiers, yet Xin Qihu was suppressing Ling Han as a 4th tier, and had not even used any heavenly venerable seals. This battle prowess was truly formidable. Ling Han did not feel that anything was wrong with this. If Xin Qihu did not have such strength, how could he possibly expect to become a 7th-tier elite? With his cultivation level of 3rd tier, Ling Han could barely match this strongest prodigy who was in the 4th tier. If word got out, his reputation would definitely soar, and he would directly crush the 3 greatest prodigies of all eternity, enjoying the honor of being number 1 alone. "Looks like I have to get a bit serious." Xin Qihu finally channeled a heavenly venerable seal, but it was only a 9th-grade seal. It clearly only increased his strength by 5 times, but it immediately gave him the upper hand. Both of them were supreme prodigies, and their natural talent and techniques in battle were impeccable. In a situation where their power was equal, it was absolutely difficult for them to determine who was stronger. Thus, once Xin Qihu gained the upper hand in terms of power, he naturally suppressed Ling Han. Ling Han parried a few moves, but was hit by a few consecutive palm strikes, causing all the bones in his body to feel like they were about to fall apart. He could only increase the stakes, channeling a 6th-grade seal to balance the power difference again. With this, the two of them were evenly matched. Chapter 2898, 2898 4 1st-grade seals. Chapter 2898, 2898 4 1st-grade seals. 2898 4 1st-grade seals. Ling Han, your true power is ultimately inferior to mine, Xin Qihu said coldly. This is the difference in pure strength, and not something that the heavenly venerable seals can make up for. Is that so? Ling Han shook his head. Since that's the case, why would you covet the heavenly venerable seals that I possess? Haha, killing you is my priority. The heavenly venerable seals are just a reward. Xin Qihu laughed loudly. He then channeled an 8th-grade seal, and once again suppressed Ling Han. Ling Han humphed, and a 5th-grade seal lit up. Thus, Xin Qihu switched to a 7th-grade seal. Ling Han next used a 4th-grade seal, while Xin Qihu used a 6th grade seal. He was always able to suppress Ling Han. "Don't you have a 1st grade seal? Let me see it," Xin Qihu said nonchalantly. He was extremely proud and appeared incomparably confident. "As you wish." Ling Han finally channeled that 1st grade seal. Hong. His power instantly went off the charts, and the ground around him collapsed endlessly. This was a shattered dimension, and it had long since died. Without the slightest bit of suppression, how could it withstand the rampage of 5th tier? If the two of them fought for a while longer, the entire dimension might be destroyed. However, Ling Han couldn't care less now. His fighting spirit had been completely ignited, and he only wished for a grand battle. As expected, Xin Qihu nodded. His hands suddenly clenched into fists. Boom! His right fist shone. A blurry seal moved and emitted an incomparably astonishing aura. Pong! The two of them exchanged a punch and were sent flying at the same time. They were actually evenly matched. Ling Han's eyes narrowed. His true power was 30 times weaker than Xin Qihu's. Now, he had channeled a 1st grade seal, yet he was only able to tie with Xin Qihu. This meant that Xin Qihu was using a 4th grade seal. Where did it come from? Was it something that he had comprehended on his own, or had it come from his old man who was a 7th tier? Boom, boom, boom. The two of them clashed fiercely with terrifying power. This dimension was already incomparably dilapidated to begin with. Now that the two of them were wreaking havoc, it was naturally even more dilapidated. Pieces of the ground caved in, some returned to become primal chaos, while other spots spewed out terrifying storms that soared into the skies like giant pillars. The commotion was so great that it attracted everyone from afar to witness the battle between the strongest prodigies. Isn't that Xin Qihu? His opponent. Heavens, he's actually a 3rd tier. With the advantage of a whole cultivation level, Xin Qihu was actually unable to suppress his opponent. He's always been the one to defeat his opponent with a disadvantage in cultivation level. Why is it the other way around now? This person is Ling Han. Legend has it that he has a 1st grade seal? That's right. What he's channeling now is definitely that. Even though I'm a 4th tier, I still feel uncomfortable from being suppressed. The numerous heavenly venerates were all astonished. Ling Han was heaven-defying. Even the greatest prodigy of all eternity could not surpass him, and that was despite an advantage in cultivation level. Without a doubt, Ling Han was going to ascend to the throne of number 1 of all history. Some people were elated as defending against hysteria required an absolute prodigy like this, while others had cold smiles on their faces, coveting the heavenly venerable seals in Ling Han's possession, and even more so keen on obtaining the secret to Ling Han's power. Ling Han, on the other hand, had forgotten everything. He only wanted to have a big battle and display all of his abilities. Not bad, not bad. You are very, very strong, Xin Qihu said with a smile. However, if your strength is only at this level, you will only die in the end. Wang, he switched to another heavenly venerable seal, but not only did his battle prowess not fall, it actually rose to another level. A 3rd grade seal. Ling Han was instantly suppressed. This was a difference of more than 10 times in power, and he was outmatched. This naturally caused everyone to exclaim in surprise. It turned out that Xin Qihu had actually hidden his strength. He actually still had a 3rd grade seal that he had yet to use. This time, Ling Han should be at his wit's end. He had already used a 1st grade seal. Could there be a heavenly venerable seal more impressive and awesome than this? Ling Han struggled to hold on. Although he was at a disadvantage in terms of power, the difference of more than 10 times in power could only suppress him, and it was still unable to truly defeat him. With his tenacious personality, how could he give up so easily? Your toughness is commendable. However, in the end, you are only a 3rd tier. Xin Qihu sneered. He channeled another heavenly venerable seal. This time, an aura that transcended the ages circulated, making him seem as if he had transformed into a god of war. Pong! It was only a single punch, but Ling Han was sent flying. He was actually no match for a single blow. First grade seal. Ling Han wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and a look of surprise appeared on his face. He absolutely did not believe that Xin Qihu could form a first-grade seal on his own. It should have been given to him by Xin Fu. It was not strange for a 7th-tier, heavenly Venerate to be able to master a first-grade seal. More importantly, it was a matter of how many such heavenly venerable seals they had mastered. Xin Qihu did not take advantage of the victory to continue his attack. He only placed his hands behind his back. How is it? So. Ling Han's fighting spirit was already completely boiling. Hong. His aura once again skyrocketed, and all 9th-grade seals lit up, forming a set of combination seals. In an instant, his battle prowess increased explosively by more than 200 times. He let out a long howl and charged toward Xin Qihu. "You're not the only one with combination seals." Xin Qihu sneered. 3 more seals flashed behind him, and his battle prowess also began to increase rapidly. Pong! He exchanged a blow with Ling Han, and was actually not at a disadvantage at all. What? This time, Ling Han was truly shocked. He had not expected that Xin Qihu would actually be able to oppose him with only 4 seals. These were also combination seals, but just 4 of them were enough to contend against him. These 4 were all first-grade seals. Furthermore, they were adjacent to each other, so they could resonate with each other and unleash an amplification of 200 times. They weren't inferior to the complete combination of the 9th-grade seals at all. 4 first-grade seals. Was this the potential of a 7th tier? A sense of helplessness rose in Ling Han's heart, but he immediately steeled his resolve. Don't forget that he was still 1 cultivation level lower than Xin Qihu. If the 2 of them were to truly fight at the same cultivation level, no matter how many first-grade seals Xin Qihu used, Ling Han would be able to suppress them with his might. Ling Han, what do you think? Xin Qihu said calmly with a faint smile. He had the initiative and was in control of the battle. Naturally, he was like a cat playing with a mouse. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "Nothing much. Wait until I advance into the 4th tier. Then I'll come and cut off your wretched head." Humph, will you still have such a day? Xin Qihu approached closely. "I'm not playing with you anymore." Ling Han directly flew into the void. To him, this was like an ocean, allowing him to soar freely. Xin Qihu did not give chase. Other than a freak like Ling Han, anyone without the guidance of a dimensional lighthouse would be like a headless fly, and would only lose their sense of direction. The void had always been a domain belonging to Hysteria, and no one dared to rashly set foot in it. Even if he had 5th-tier battle prowess, he still wouldn't dare to act recklessly. Unless he was in the 6th tier, he wouldn't be able to match it, and this was only because Hysteria's main body was restricted by several 7th tiers. Otherwise, even 6th tiers would be in trouble. He stood in his tracks as a strange smile appeared on his face. Chapter 2899, 2899 Mission. Chapter 2899, 2899 Mission. 2899 Mission. Xin Qihu just stood there. He had at least 4 first-grade seals, but no one dared to snatch them. He was a super elite with battle prowess at the peak of the 5th tier. It could be said that no one could suppress him unless he was a 6th tier himself. Moreover, Xin Qihu's father was a supreme being of the 7th tier. Who dared to touch Xin Qihu? Wasn't he afraid that Xin Fu would drop everything and come looking for him? Who wouldn't be afraid of the might of 7th tier? Ling Han entered into the void, just circled around, and then returned to this lost, overlapping dimension. He sat cross-legged and digested his battle experience with Xin Qihu. Ling Han had benefited a lot from fighting such super elites and prodigies. Not only had his cultivation level increased, but he had also refined his combat techniques. He spent 3 years in seclusion this time, and this was only the case because his thoughts could be accelerated. Otherwise, it would have taken much longer. "Something doesn't seem right," he muttered, but he couldn't figure out what was wrong, so he shook his head and stopped paying attention to this problem. Just as he was about to move, he suddenly grasped a special signal. Meng Dong. He had finally appeared. Previously, Meng Dong had made an agreement with Ling Han. When the latter grasped this signal, it meant that the former wanted to see him. Only special people like them could use this signal, and only they could grasp it. It was a very safe and reliable method of communication. Of course, it could only be used when they were relatively close, even if they were all heavenly venerates. This was a price that had to be paid for safety. However, even when both parties sent out the same signal, there was still a slight difference. It would be imbued with each person's unique intent, allowing them to completely differentiate who had sent out this signal. If not for that, Ling Han would have killed Meng Dong long ago. He would have used this signal to lure out all the remaining dregs of hysteria and killed them one by one. He would have been able to resolve this huge problem very quickly. In just a moment, Meng Dong flew over. "Little brother, long time no see. You really know how to run. If I hadn't seen your battle with Xin Qihu a few years ago, I wouldn't have known where to find you," he said. Ling Han took the opportunity to say, "I don't know where our base camp is. Even if I have something to discuss with you, I have nowhere to go." Meng Dong laughed heartily and said, "There's no need to rush. There's a mission for you to complete right now. This is a test for you from the Lord. As long as you complete this mission perfectly, you'll truly be accepted." Ling Han was shocked. Hysteria was actually still worried about him. When did he reveal any flaws? He was actually being guarded against? Thinking about it again, Ling Han was relieved. The others had all awakened as soon as they entered the heavenly venerable tier, but he had still not been awakened, even at second tier. If Hysteria hadn't made a move and forced Ling Han to see those scenes, he wouldn't have known that he actually had a deep connection with Hysteria. Even so, he hadn't changed sides. Why would Hysteria trust him? This was a sly old fox who had lived for who knew how long. How could it trust others so easily? Ling Han deliberately put on an expression of indignation. "You don't trust me?" Meng Dong hurriedly waved his hand. "Little brother, this is also for the sake of caution. After all, we're doing something world-shaking." Ling Han was only intentionally complaining. This was his normal reaction. He said, "All right, what's the mission this time?" Meng Dong shook his head. "It's not convenient to talk about it in detail here. Come with me." This guy was quite careful. Ling Han did not object and followed him. After walking for several days, they arrived at an abandoned raw stone mine. Stone layers that had been cut were everywhere, and Meng Dong had constructed a simple formation with them that could completely cut off the divine sense of a heavenly venerate. Heavenly venerable stones had such an effect to begin with, so it was naturally safer to use them to set up a formation. "Wait a few days," said Meng Dong. Ling Han did not ask and merely sat cross-legged. A few days later, a man suddenly appeared. "Let me introduce you. This is Brother Ba Duo," Meng Dong said as he pointed at this man, and then pointed at Ling Han. "This is Ling Han. Brother Ling, I've heard of your great name for a long time. When will you come and spar with me?" Ba Duo asked, his face full of fighting spirit. He was a third-tier heavenly venerate. For him to be chosen by Hysteria, or perhaps be affected by Hysteria's consciousness, meant that his strength should be extremely powerful, not weaker than Meng Dong's. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "All right." In a battle at equal cultivation level, whom was he afraid of? Meng Dong hurriedly stopped the two from fighting, and smilingly said, "There's no hurry to spar. We're all brothers, and there are plenty of opportunities. It's more important to complete the Lord's mission." Only then did Ba Duo shut his mouth, but the way he looked at Ling Han was still filled with provocation. Ling Han naturally wouldn't shrink back, and similarly looked at the other party with a challenging gaze. If the other party dared to make a move, he would definitely knock the other party to the ground with a single punch, shattering all of his teeth. The mission this time is to send this thing into the core of the flaming frost realm. Meng Dong finally revealed the specific content of the mission. He took out an item. It was a sphere that was flowing with a pitch-black luster and exuded an incomparably evil aura. Ling Han's eyes narrowed. "What is this?" "You only need to complete the mission. Don't ask what you shouldn't ask." Ba Duo immediately shouted. "Hey, hey, hey. Meng Dong hurriedly waved his hand. We're all family. Why can't he ask questions? He chuckled. This is something forged by our Lord. It has a strong corrosive effect on the dimensional core. He looked at Ling Han and continued. As long as this thing is thrown into the core of the flaming frost realm, it will greatly weaken the power of this realm, allowing our Lord to gain the upper hand in a dimensional clash. Ling Han was shocked. This move was truly vicious. The core of a dimension was the heart of a dimension. If it was corroded, it would greatly weaken the power of the dimension. Of course, it was also incomparably difficult to achieve this, especially against a transcendent dimension like the flaming frost realm. Even 6th-tier elites would only be reduced to ashes if they tried to face it head-on. Could this thing really work? Ling Han didn't know if Hysteria was testing him on purpose. Perhaps it didn't have the effect Meng Dong had mentioned at all. But what if it was true? Ling Han hesitated. Should he directly take down Meng Dong and Ba Duo and resolve this conspiracy against the flaming frost realm? Or should he continue to feign civility and become a spy to find all of Hysteria's moles? It would be easy to take them out, but he would also lose this line. Furthermore, if this was really a test aimed at him, then it would be fine. If this thing really worked, then even if he resolved it this time, Hysteria would still be able to do it a second time and a third time. There would be a lot of people who could use it, and he wouldn't be the only one who could do it. Thinking of this, Ling Han nodded. Understood. Chapter 2900, 2900 Switch. Chapter 2900, 2900 Switch. 2900 Switch. All right, I'll leave this important matter to you. Meng Dong nodded and handed the thing in his hand to Ba Duo. This time, the leader will be Ba Duo. A smug look appeared on Ba Duo's face. See, he was the one who was more trusted by the Lord. Ling Han was slightly surprised because it was obvious from Ba Duo's expression that he was wholeheartedly working for Hysteria and even found a sense of honor in it. He was already a heavenly Venerate, so how could he have such thoughts? Heavenly Venerates were high and mighty, and they had already transcended everything. However, Ba Duo was passionate about working for Hysteria and would even become jealous over this. This was extremely unbelievable. Yes, it was a little like a few sons fighting for favor as they tried to please their father. All right, I wish you success in advance. I'll prepare a celebratory feast for you and wait for your return. Meng Dong smiled. Let's go, prodigy, Ba Duo said to Ling Han. Ling Han stepped forwards, and when he was close to Ba Duo, he suddenly threw a punch. Pong. Firstly, Ba Duo had not expected him to suddenly attack. Secondly, Ling Han's strength was much stronger than his. How could he possibly dodge? He directly fell to the ground, feeling dizzy and was unable to get up immediately. Ling Han did not take advantage of the situation to push his advantage. Instead, he calmly said, "Watch your words. If it weren't for our Lord, I would have already killed you." Meng Dong originally wanted to make a move, but seeing that Ling Han didn't take any further action, and that Ba Duo was only beaten to the ground, he gave up on the idea of making a move. He said, "Ling Han, we're all on the same side. Don't hurt the harmony between us." Ling Han chuckled and said, "As long as no one is being despicable, I won't be overbearing either." Ba Duo finally recovered. He got up, and when he heard Ling Han's words, he was instantly enraged. Wasn't this just saying right to his nose that he had been asking for a beating? All right. Mengla stopped him in time. Let's go. Don't delay our Lord's important matter. The corners of Bardo's mouth twitched, but he didn't say anything else. Instead, he turned around and left. Ling Han followed nonchalantly, and it wasn't until the two of them had disappeared that Meng Dong finally looked up at the sky and muttered, "Little brother, are you guilty or innocent? This time, I should be able to test you." Ling Han followed Ba Duo, his pace neither too fast nor too slow. Actually, if he was allowed to travel freely, he could quickly transmigrate through the void. This was because the power in his body could reflect the various dimensions and allowed him to leap freely through the void. This was unlike Ba Duo, who could only reflect the flaming frost realm and had to advance in only one direction. The void was an extremely complicated space, and the shortest distance between 2 points was definitely not a straight line. Zhou Heng should be waiting for them in the flaming frost realm, Ling Han thought to himself. Previously, when he had sent Ba Duo flying with a slap, it was not for the simple purpose of venting his anger. Instead, he had seized the opportunity to send out a power of dimension, condensing it into a doppelganger that had hidden himself in the ground beneath Ba Duo. There was a large amount of stone layers here, and they could cut off the divine sense of heavenly venerable tier. As long as this doppelganger did not actively expose himself, Meng Dong and Ba Duo would not be able to notice anything amiss. After Meng Dong left, the doppelganger immediately went to look for Zhou Heng and told him the current situation. With a cultivation level of 6th tier, catching up to them was definitely not difficult. It wasn't that Ling Han couldn't deal with Ba Duo, but if he wanted Ba Duo to be knocked out without being able to even react, then he definitely didn't have the strength to achieve such a feat. After traveling through the void for thousands of years, they finally broke through the dimensional barrier and entered their destination, the flaming frost realm. Hong, void energy surged out, but the power of dimension immediately repaired itself, cutting off the energy storm from the void. This created a huge impact, causing Ling Han's and Ba Duo's body to tremble, and they felt as if their bodies were being twisted. Right at this moment, an indescribable power struck Ba Duo, and he fainted before he could even react. Shio, a figure flashed, and Zhou Heng appeared. Ling Han was not surprised at all, because it was precisely his doppelganger that had told Zhou Heng to lay an ambush here. If it were another heavenly Venerate, it would definitely be impossible for them to achieve this. Only Ling Han, whose body was imbued with the powers of dimension, would be able to accurately calculate their exit location. Moreover, only an elite like Zhou Heng could do it such that Ba Duo could not even react, because this was not as simple as killing him. Ling Han searched Ba Duo, retrieved the black sphere, and handed it to Zhou Heng. His body trembled, and he retracted the power of dimension he had sent out. Zhou Heng took the sphere and sensed it carefully. After a while, he revealed a solemn expression. There's indeed the power of hysteria inside. It has a huge corrosive effect. If it's really thrown into the dimensional core, it will severely weaken the flaming frost realm. Senior, can you replicate it? Ling Han asked. He didn't want to expose his identity just like that, so the best way was to do a switch and throw the forged item into the dimensional core. This way, he could still stay among Meng Dong and the others and probe the identities of others. At the same time, he wouldn't be weakening the flaming frost realm and helping them do evil. Zhou Heng shook his head. This is a power that is unique to hysteria. I am helpless too. Just as Ling Han was feeling disappointed, Zhou Heng said, however, I'll immediately make a trip to the realm battlefield and ask Master for help. He should be able to neutralize the corrosive effects within. He was a man of action and immediately rushed to the realm battlefield. Meanwhile, Ling Han sat down on Ba Duo's body and used his own power to suppress him. Otherwise, how could it be possible to refrain from injuring Ba Duo and at the same time keep him unconscious? Fortunately, Zhou Heng returned in just over a month. He returned the black sphere to Ling Han. The problem has been resolved. Ling Han nodded and placed the black sphere back in its original spot on Ba Duo. Then, he tore open space and re-entered the void. He calculated the position accurately and tore open the void again. Shio. The two of them flew out. The power of dimension cut off the energy storm from the void, causing a violent tremor. Ba Duo immediately woke up. In his mind, it was still a month ago, so he naturally took a step forward and landed steadily on the ground. Ling Han was one step behind him and also stepped out. Ba Duo didn't have the slightest bit of suspicion. The reason why a 6th tier had personally made a move was to ensure that Ba Duo wouldn't notice anything. Ba Duo strode forward in large strides, heading toward the core of the dimension. Just over 10 days later, they arrived at their destination. This was actually still quite a distance away, and it was impossible to truly get close. This was the core of a transcendent dimension, and even a 6th tier could be killed by it, let alone a mere 3rd tier. Ba Duo took out the black sphere, glanced at Ling Han, and said, "I'm going to throw it in." Ling Han frowned and said, "Cut the crap. Are you asking for a beating?" Ba Duo was enraged, but he forcibly suppressed it and raised his right hand. Shio. This black ball was thrown toward the dimensional core. Pung! It was impossible for the black ball to come close to the dimensional core at all, and it was immediately shattered by the tremendous force that surged around the dimensional core. However, a black aura surged from it, and it transformed into countless tentacles. Chapter 29:01 29:01 Mission complete. Chapter 29:01 29:01 Mission complete. 29:01 Mission complete. The power of dimension was extremely terrifying. Even if it was a super low-level dimension that could only produce first-tier heavenly venerates, it would require at least second-tier strength to destroy its dimensional core. In the past, the foreign realm had invaded the celestial realm, and it was precisely because it was deterred by the power of dimension that even heavenly venerates could not invade it. They could only rely on the foreign realm itself to suppress it and commence the realm war. Right now, the flaming frost realm was a transcendent dimension, and even sixth tiers would only be reduced to ashes should they face it head-on. Although seventh tiers were undying and indestructible, there was a limit to their power, and they, too, were unable to invade the core. However, it was Hysteria's doing this time. Endless black chi spread out like a net. However, there were small tentacles on the net that surrounded the dimensional core. The black chi couldn't be stopped or destroyed. It was extremely difficult to deal with. This was Hysteria, the most dangerous existence in history. The black chi descended slowly but incredibly steadily. In the end, it completely covered the dimensional core and sank into it. Instantly, the dimensional core trembled violently. Pung, pung, pung. Violent energy shot out from it, and its power was incomparably terrifying. Even Ling Han's expression changed. This could easily kill a fifth-tier elite. Without another word, he turned around and left. Ba Duo did not dare to stay any longer either, and hurriedly left with Ling Han. Since the mission was completed, there was no point in staying here any longer. Shio, Shio. The two of them flew out of the ground layer. Ba Duo looked at Ling Han coldly and said, "I will find you for a battle. Then why don't we do it now? I guarantee that you'll yield." Ling Han said casually. In his eyes, this Ba Duo was just a matter that could be resolved with a single punch. Humph. Ba Duo didn't reply. With a flash, he disappeared without a trace. Ling Han stood quietly. This time, he could be considered to have completed Hysteria's mission and proven his allegiance. Next, he should be able to obtain the acceptance of Mengdong and the others. From there, he would dig out all the traitors and eliminate them one by one. Hurry, hurry. He didn't want to waste time on such matters and affect his cultivation. He returned to the primitive, overlapping dimension. After finding the Empress and Hu Niu, he continued their expedition to explore for veins of ore. The gains here were huge, but no force had proceeded to set up a raw stone lane right now, because the cost of digging was too high, requiring a third-tier heavenly venerate to personally do it. They all directly mined and opened the stones immediately. This meant that Ling Han had one less channel to obtain treasure, but there was no other Grandmaster of raw stone that could enter this place. Ling Han was the only one. While others were randomly digging, he was purposeful and selective, so his gains were still far greater than others. Moreover, his current battle prowess was at the 5th tier, and when the combination seals displayed their might, he could even suppress the majority of 5th-tier elites. Naturally, this gave Ling Han a huge advantage in battle. There were more and more heavenly venerable seals in his possession, and from here onwards, the heavenly venerable seals were basically of the 8th grade. Could he collect another set of combination seals, a complete set of 8th grade seals? After excavating all the veins of or in this dimension, Ling Han and the others headed towards the 7th dimension. However, even 3rd tiers could not pass through here. The flames formed by the friction and burning of fundamental particles could easily incinerate 3rd tiers into ashes, and even 4th tiers would have to go all out to resist the extreme heat. It was extremely tough even for the Empress and Hunyo, who managed to rely on their own strength to pass through the ground layer of the 6th dimension and enter into the 7th dimension. Here, there were naturally fewer people, and this dimension was smaller and more dilapidated. If there was only 1% of the 6th level left, then there would only be 1% of the 7th left. Ling Han was extremely careful. Right now, there were many people watching him, and as long as a few 5th tiers joined forces, they would be able to put him in a very tough situation. Furthermore, there were also 6th tiers as well. This was an existence that he absolutely could not match right now, and he could even be insta-killed. Tens of thousands of years later, this dimension was once again completely excavated. Thus, the battlefield shifted to the 8th dimension again. Here, only 5th tier elites could enter. Even the celestial guest residence was not very safe, so Ling Han had the Empress and Hunyo bring it with them. The two women directly returned to the 1st dimension, while Ling Han went deeper into the 8th dimension. This should also be the last dimension he could explore. Because one had to be at least a 5th tier to enter this place, the number of heavenly venerates had suddenly decreased to around 1,000, and no matter how dilapidated this plane was, it was still shockingly large, allowing every heavenly venerate to gain a lot. After 7,000 years, Ling Han decided to return because he had explored all the places that could be explored, and he had also tried to go to the next dimension, but he was completely unable to do so. The flames there could insta-kill 5th tiers, so there was no need to take such a huge risk. Ling Han also returned to the 1st dimension. After reuniting with the Empress and the others, he waited for news from Zhou Hong and the others. Another 3,000 years later, Zhou Hong and the others returned. Ling Han went to find out about the situation and learned that even a 6th tier could only stop at the 9th dimension. The 10th dimension could only be explored by a 7th tier, and no one knew if the 10th dimension was the end at all. There might even be an 11th, 101st, or infinite dimensions. Master and the other 7th tier great elites already have some guesses, but they're currently fighting against the main body of hysteria, so they can't free themselves to take a look at it personally, so they can't confirm which guess is correct, Chu Hao said. It's almost time for us to return as well. The value of this group of primitive dimensions lay in the raw stones. After the raw stones were all mined, what was the point of them staying here any longer? Yes, get ready. We should go back. Zhou Hong nodded. Everyone needed to prepare. Many people had come to the 1st dimension, including celestial kings, ascending origin tiers, and so on. They needed heavenly venerates to help them transmigrate through the void. Ling Han prepared to go into seclusion. Over the years, he had obtained many 8th grade seals. Although they had not formed a complete set, he had collected 3 super large combination talismans. One had 32 seals, another had 36 seals, and yet another had 40. There were a total of 1,108 of them. Ling Han was only 3 seals away from collecting the whole set. However, this wasn't the most terrifying part. Once the 8th grade seals were complete, they could be pieced together with the 9th grade seals to form an even more astonishing set of combination seals. Coincidentally, 2 of the 3 missing 8th grade seals would connect 2 sets of 8th grade combination seals, and the last one would connect the 9th and 8th grade combination seals. In other words, this was the first seal of the set of 8th grade seals. Should he slowly collect them from opening raw stones in the future? Ling Han shook his head. All the raw stones that could have been mined had already been mined. Even if some forces still had stockpiles, who would be willing to take them out? Moreover, would it just so happen that these 3 particular seals would be unearthed? He could either wait until he reached the 5th tier or even 6th tier, and then go deeper into the 10th and 11th dimensions. He believed that there would still be a large number of raw stones for him to complete this great sequence. However, this would take too long. Therefore, he planned to go into seclusion and deduce these 3 seals himself. Chapter 2902, 2902, Successful Deduction. Chapter 2902, 2902, Successful Deduction. 2902, Successful Deduction. This was not impossible, because Ling Han already had the seal before and the seal after in the sequence, and he could use their resonance to deduce the middle one. Deducing heavenly venerable seals was a compulsory course for elites with cultivation level of 3rd tier or higher, but if he imagined it without any reference, it would be too difficult to accomplish. The level of difficulty currently experienced by Ling Han was much lower. Furthermore, he also had the experience in repairing heavenly venerable seals. The might of millions and millions of powers of dimension within his body was definitely more beneficial than what other heavenly venerates had. However, before Ling Han went into seclusion, he had also heard quite a bit of news, such as that the Grandmasters of Raw Stone had suffered retribution, given that revenge was a dish best served cold. A large number of Grandmasters of Raw Stone had been killed, and the reason was that they had been too arrogant previously. Currently, Grandmasters of Raw Stone were trash, so which heavenly venerate would still care? In the past, you actually dared to show your dissatisfaction to the heavenly venerates, and in fact even ordered them around? Had you no idea what kind of existence a heavenly venerate was? Even the heavens had to respect them. With the exception of a crafty old fox like Grandmaster Xianlai, who knew how to conduct himself, and was still living very comfortably, the group of Raw Stone Grandmasters had suffered a huge blow. Their rise to fame had been sudden, and their fall was also shockingly fast. In the end, relying on others to raise one's status wasn't reliable. Only one's own strength would truly matter. Ling Han shook his head and did not take it to heart. He began his seclusion. He observed his mind and activated the powers of dimension in his body. The 2 series of heavenly venerable seals glowed, and there was a faint connection between them. One set was 9th grade seals, while the other set was 8th grade seals. There was only a single seal missing in the middle to completely connect them together. This was the first thing Ling Han deduced. If he could produce this seal, then how terrifying would his boosted power be with that set of 9th grade seals and nearly 1/3 of the set of 8th grade seals? Wong, Wong, Wong. The infinite powers of dimension within his body shone, causing his mind to seemingly have become the void, illuminating the heavens. Streams of primal chaos chi gushed out from every cell and turned into a vast ocean around him. Every strand of primal chaos chi was extremely heavy. If not for Ling Han's existence, a single strand of primal chaos chi would be able to destroy a low-level dimension. Ling Han's mind was empty, but his enlightenment was as resplendent as fireworks. It made him feel as if he could see the birth and development of the entire Genesis world. The 6 fundamental powers were the foundation, they were everything, and the heavenly venerable seals were a tool that could communicate with the fundamental powers. It was unknown how many years had passed when Ling Han's body trembled, and he suddenly opened his eyes. There were no whites in his eyes, nor were there any black pupils. There was only an expanse of primal chaos, exuding a strange aura. It was not heavenly venerable tier, but it was definitely not weaker than the heavenly venerable tier. He jolted again and woke up from this strange state. A joyous expression appeared on his face. He had finally deduced the first 8th grade seal, and it radiated within his mind. Come, my super combination seals. Wong, 144 symbols were channeled at the same time. At first, Ling Han was filled with anticipation, but a look of bewilderment immediately appeared on his face. His strength increased by 262 times. That didn't seem right. His 8th grade combination seals could already increase his strength by 257 times. Then, further connected with the complete 9th grade combination seals, the increase in power should definitely exceed 300 times. Why was it so low? This was because the 9th grade seals couldn't be combined with the 8th grade seals, and it was as if one was just channeling irrelevant heavenly venerable seals. No matter how many there were, only the most powerful heavenly venerable seal could be effective. In Ling Han's case, this was the most powerful set of combination seals displaying its might. This was strange. The heavenly venerable seal he deduced had to be correct. Otherwise, it would be impossible to increase the power of the 8th grade combination seals. But why couldn't it be combined with the 9th grade combination seals? Could it be that he needed a complete set of 8th grade combination seals? Ling Han decided to continue deducing. He only needed 2, and they both had adjacent heavenly venerable seals to resonate with, so deducing them was still not too difficult. He went into seclusion again. Time flew by, and it was unknown how many years had passed. Ling Han comprehended the second 8th grade seal and connected the original 2 sets of 8th grade seals together. The increase in power instantly exceeded 400 times. He didn't stop and continued to deduce the last 8th grade seal. Time was meaningless to him as once again countless years had passed, and Ling Han awakened for the 3rd time. 8th grade seals, set complete. Come on, come on. Ling Han couldn't help but be filled with anticipation. This time it ought to work, right? He channeled all the 9th and 8th grade seals. Wong, all 222 heavenly venerable seals lit up in unison. Pong! The secret chamber where he was cultivating in seclusion immediately exploded, and a terrifying power shot into the sky, breaking through the sealed barrier of this dimension and piercing into the void. After the passing of so many years, there weren't many people left here, but there were some people who were still hopeful after all and were exploring. There might still be some raw stones left behind. However, at this moment, everyone felt a chill in their heart. Looking at the pillar of light soaring into the sky, everyone with cultivation level below the heavenly venerable tier knelt down, and even the heavenly venerates themselves felt their hearts race. The seals within their bodies were automatically channeled, cheering excitedly, as if they wanted to submit to that pillar of light. A complete set of heavenly venerable seals surpassing a 1st grade seal was too terrifying. However, Ling Han was not happy, because he discovered that the 2 strings of heavenly venerable seals could not display their might at the same time. His power had increased by an astonishing 999 times, but this was the power of the 8th grade seals. The 9th grade seals were completely ineffective. How strange. He had already gathered all the 8th grade seals, so why couldn't he combine them with the 9th grade seals? Was it impossible to combine them at all? Or did he have to gather all the heavenly venerable seals before they could take effect? If it was the former, then there was no need to mention anything else. If it was the latter, then the time required to collect them would be unimaginably long, and in fact, there might never be a day when this goal could be completed. Ling Han stopped channeling the heavenly venerable seals and slowly nodded. Lin Luo had divided all the heavenly venerable seals into 9 levels. It seemed that it wasn't just because of the difference in the increase in power, but also because they had their own characteristics. This was the only way to distinguish them. See, 8th grade seals were adjacent to 9th grade seals. They could resonate and sense each other, but they can't take effect at the same time. Ling Han had nothing to be dissatisfied with. He now possessed a complete set of 8th grade combination seals, and his power could be increased by nearly 1,000 times. This was too terrifying. Even if he were to encounter Xin Qihu again, he was confident that he could fight to his heart's content. Time to go out and take a look. When he came out of seclusion, the Empress and the others were already waiting for him, and the time they had been waiting had shockingly reached 30 billion years. Ling Han couldn't help but be shocked. He didn't seem to have spent much time, so how could 30 billion years be gone just like that? Let's return to the flaming frost realm, the Empress said gently. Have the others all returned? Ling Han asked. Yes, second brother, Jin Xue, and the others have already returned. The Empress nodded. After 30 billion years, her cultivation level had also reached the late stage of the 3rd tier, and such speed was already considered fast. After all, there was no longer any supply of great herbs. All right, we'll go back as well. Ling Han stretched out his hand, and all the women entered the celestial guest residence. Then, he began to shuttle through the void. More than 10 years later, he returned to the flaming frost realm. Immediately, he received a message from Mengdong. Logo. Chapter 2903, 2903 Let's Par. Chapter 2903, 2903 Let's Par. 2903 Let's Par. Mengdong should indeed look for Ling Han. Back when Ling Han had completed the mission, there should have been a celebratory feast waiting for him. However, he was either busy mining or had gone into seclusion for a long time. It was impossible for Meng Dong to find him. Now that Ling Han had returned to the Flaming Frost Realm, the latter had finally arrived. Ling Han also sent out a message in reply to Meng Dong. After a while, Meng Dong arrived. "You've really made it difficult for me to find you." Meng Dong shook his head. 30 billion years had passed, and Meng Dong had already advanced to 4th tier. This speed was astonishing, and even if he was inferior to Xin Qihu and the others, he could also be considered a rarity himself. After all, in a certain sense, he was a creation of hysteria. Ling Han believed that Lu Xie, Baduo, and the others had also advanced to the 4th tier. Ling Han couldn't help but think of himself. After more than 30 billion years, he had actually only advanced a little bit. If the middle stage to the late stage of the 3rd tier was divided into 100 steps, then he would have taken about 10 steps. At most 12. At this speed, if he wanted to reach the peak stage of 3rd tier, he would really need a whole epoch. Ling Han sighed inwardly. Without the support of great herbs and refining of the life essence of heavenly venerates, his cultivation speed was truly low. And this was still because he had obtained more than 200 heavenly venerable seals, which increased his cultivation speed by nearly 1,000 times. Otherwise, how slowly would his cultivation progress? 1,000 epochs to advance to the next tier. Ling Han didn't even dare to think about it. If that was really the case, then he would have to cultivate until God knew when. It'd be a cold day in hell when he would advance to the 7th tier. Thus Ling Han thought to himself, but his expression didn't change. He nodded and said, "I was in seclusion all this while and couldn't bother with anything else. Come, let me introduce you to a few brothers and sisters." Meng Dong smiled and did not waste any time on the previous topic. "All right," Ling Han agreed. This was exactly what he wanted. Although Meng Dong had already advanced to the 4th tier, Ling Han did not take it to heart. Although Ling Han's cultivation level progressed slowly, it was only his cultivation levels increased that was slow. His strength was still rising at a terrifying rate, especially now that he had the complete set of 8th grade seals, which caused his strength to increase by nearly 1,000 times. Whom was he afraid of? Meng Dong led the way, while Ling Han followed behind. After traveling for several days, they arrived at a mountain range and then entered a cave. It actually had a powerful effect of cutting off divine sense. Ling Han took a closer look and saw heavenly venerable stone scraps all over the cave walls. These people were really careful. With these stone scraps blocking the sense of heavenly venerates, even if the 7th tiers returned, they might not be able to discover them. Soon, the two of them arrived at a huge underground chamber. The space was huge, as if there was another world here. Meng Dong. There were 6 people standing or sitting cross-legged. When they saw Meng Dong, they all called out. Ling Han swept his gaze over them. He recognized 2 of them. They were naturally Lu Xie and Baduo. He didn't recognize the other 4 at all, but their cultivation level was 4th tier. No matter where they were placed, this group could be said to be extremely powerful. "Come, let's get to know each other. This is Ling Han, our last awakened brother." Meng Dong patted Ling Han's shoulder. Ling Han nodded at these people and said, "I've been looking forward to it for a long time. I've finally met all of you." Back then, he had seen hysteria shoot out hundreds of light spots. Although most of them had been annihilated in the void, there were still more than 100 light spots that had entered various dimensions. Even if only half of them had matured, there should be about 50 of them now, far more than this number. The 4 people whom he didn't know also introduced themselves. They were Luo Ming, Yang Ke, Wu Junyi, and Xiao Ying. All of them were very arrogant. This was a kind of sense of superiority that originated from their advantage in cultivation level. "Ling Han, I heard that your tier-surpassing battle prowess was extremely formidable, and I would like to spar with you," Xiaoying said. Their hostility was so great, and Xiaoying already wanted to challenge Ling Han right from the start. Ling Han glanced at Baduo. This guy was also full of fighting spirit. It was obvious that he felt that he had reached a higher level and was now qualified to challenge Ling Han. "Sure." Ling Han nodded, appearing very indifferent. Unless his opponent was Xin Qihu, it would be really difficult for him to have much interest. His perfunctory attitude naturally made Xiaoying very dissatisfied, but he didn't say anything. A cold smile appeared on his lips. His strength was not a mere boast. It was a result of genuine battles. Come and fight. He soared into the air. The space here was extremely large, and with a little control, it absolutely could allow heavenly venerates to battle. Ling Han paced into the air one step after another, put his left hand behind his back, and then hooked his right hand. Make your move. Xiaoying was even more dissatisfied. How much do you look down on me? He let out a long howl and charged towards Ling Han. His hands turned into hammers, which he smashed towards Ling Han. Being chosen by Hysteria, each of them was a super genius. Even at 4th tier, they had a certain level of tier-surpassing battle prowess. For example, Xiaoying was only in the early stage of the 4th tier, but his battle prowess had reached the peak of the 4th tier. It was truly astonishing. It was unknown if this guy had nurtured a small world in his body, or if he had collected a lot of powers of dimension. Prior to reaching 6th tier, there was actually not much difference. The more powers of dimension he harvested, the stronger it would be as compared to the power of a small world. However, if he only harvested 10 to 20 powers of dimension, he would soon be surpassed by the power of a small world. Ling Han appeared nonchalant and only returned Xiaoying's punch when it arrived. Pong! The power of his fist was too terrifying. When Ling Han punched out, endless primal chaos chi surged, and Xiaoying's attack power was instantly shattered. However, Ling Han did not take advantage of his victory to push his advantage. Instead, he stopped the force of his fist in time and smiled faintly at Xiaoying. The more polite he acted, the angrier Xiaoying became. This was because this was simply a blatant disregard in Xiaoying's eyes. Xiaoying roared. Wang. He had already channeled a heavenly venerable seal. In an instant, he seemed to have transformed into a god, exuding a powerful aura that suppressed the heavens. First grade seal. With a shake of his hands, his arms turned purple-golden, and strange veined patterns appeared on them. He charged out, brandishing his arms as he swept them at Ling Han. Ling Han raised his hand to receive it head-on. Pong! He felt his arm shake, and he actually felt as if it was about to break apart. Although a heavenly venerate's body was tempered by fundamental power, and it would seem as if one gained an indestructible body made of devouring metal at great accomplishment when one advanced to the 7th tier, the body could never be compared to devouring metal prior to that point. However, Xiaoying's arms gave Ling Han a feeling that this was simply a heavenly venerate tool. If he could cultivate his physique to such an extent at 4th tier, then apart from a 7th tier, could anyone else hurt him? Utterly impossible. Ling Han immediately shook his head. He dusted off his hands to dispel the numbness in his arms, and then suddenly said, "You refined the devouring metal into your body. No wonder your arms are so strong." It's not just the arms. Xiaoying sneered, and his figure pounced forward, launching a fierce attack at Ling Han. An ancient and aged veined pattern appeared on every part of his body. Chapter 2904, 2904 Setup. Chapter 2904, 2904 Setup. 2904 Setup. It wasn't just the arms. Every part of Xiaoying's body was infused with devouring metal, making his physique incomparably powerful. He was completely unrestrained as he violently attacked Ling Han. Such a concept was very simple, but even a 6th tier heavenly venerate would not be able to do this. It seemed that it was because of Hysteria that he possessed such a bizarre ability. Ling Han's power naturally far surpassed Xiaoying's. He casually attacked, and Xiaoying was sent flying. There was no need for direct contact at all. Under the suppression of his overwhelming power, this was too easy for him. It was just like how an ordinary person wouldn't be able to shatter a rock with a punch, as that would have caused them to injure their own fist instead. However, it would be a piece of cake for them to throw this rock away. Xiaoying laughed loudly. Is that all you have? Although he was continuously sent flying by Ling Han, he was completely unharmed. Ling Han was speechless. Exactly whose cultivation level was higher? You are treated like a punching bag by me. Yet you still have a smug look on your face. Where does this sense of superiority come from? Ling Han didn't know where to start even if he wanted to ridicule him. Hee, we're all family. There's no need to fight for real. Meng Dong tried to mediate. That's right, Lu Xie said as well. Everyone was trying to mediate the fight, so Ling Han and Xiaoying naturally couldn't continue fighting. Let's fight again next time. Xiaoying was full of fighting spirit. Whatever, Ling Han said calmly. Come, let's drink. Meng Dong smiled and called out to everyone. The 8 of them sat down and began to drink. All creations in the world were the result of the manifestation of regulations, and it was the same even for celestial king-tier great herbs. Thus, there was no wine that could make a heavenly Venerate become drunk. They would absolutely be unaffected, alright? However, when Ling Han took a sip of this wine, he actually felt a wave of dizziness. He was a little puzzled. Hee, are you surprised? Meng Dong said with a smile. This is wine refined from supremely valuable medicine. Of course, it also has an effect on heavenly Venerates. So that was the case indeed? Ling Han chuckled and continued to savor the wine, but did not swallow it. These people were all Hysteria's subordinates. Even if he had already made his way into the inner workings of the enemy camp, he still had to be careful. After all, even if these 7 people didn't intend to harm him, if they were related to Hysteria, how could this wine be consumed? Ling Han only swallowed a little bit of the wine, but the power of dimension within his body immediately started to be frantically channeled, grinding this tiny bit of effect of the wine. Instantly, the dizziness disappeared, turning into some incomparably pure power that increased his cultivation level. Ling Han wasn't sure if this was wine refined from supremely valuable medicine, but it was indeed effective in increasing one's cultivation level. Seeing that the power of dimension in his body was so awesome, Ling Han no longer controlled it and began to drink in large mouthfuls. The power in his body surged, making him feel extremely comfortable. Drink! Meng Dong and the others also toasted repeatedly. Brother, you and Ba Duo made a great contribution last time, and we haven't organized a celebratory feast for you. This time, it's not only a welcome ceremony for you, but also a celebratory feast. Come, drink. Everyone kept urging him to drink, and Ling Han didn't refuse any of them. Very quickly, he appeared to be drunk. As Meng Dong and the others urged Ling Han to continue drinking, cold smiles gradually appeared on their faces. Little brother, you really disappoint us, Lu Xie suddenly said. What do you mean? Ling Han shook his head in a daze. Do you really think that after tampering with our Lord's sphere, our Lord won't be aware of it at all? Meng Dong said coldly. Ling Han was shocked. Hysteria actually knew that its sphere had been tampered with and could no longer corrode the flaming frost realm. This was impossible. After all, they were separated by a whole dimension. How did Hysteria sense it? To say that Hysteria had seen through it, because there was not much effect on the flaming frost realm, was actually not reliable. This was because even if the dimension was weakened, it would still take a period of an epoch to show any effects. What was a mere 30 billion years? It seemed that he had truly underestimated Hysteria's ability. In other words, he had not passed the loyalty test of Hysteria, and now he was going to be punished? Nonsense, you're completely slandering me, Ling Han said in a slurred tone. Hee, you still want to prevaricate at a time like this? Lu Xie said coldly. Don't waste your breath on him, just kill him. Ba Duo shouted. He hated Ling Han the most. Back then, he had been knocked to the ground by Ling Han with a single punch, and this was a great humiliation to him. Meng Dong waved his hand. There's no hurry. There's a trace of our Lord's true energy in this wine. Even if our little brother's abilities are heaven-defying, it's still impossible for him to rival it. But don't worry, little brother. This trace of true energy won't do any harm to your body. Instead, it'll allow your cultivation level to improve greatly. It's just that. Ba Duo couldn't help but interrupt. You'll sleep for a long time. I know you're strong, so to be safe, I even used our Lord's true energy on you. You're really fortunate. Luoming gave a fake smile. None of them were reluctant, because they all had the ability to absorb the life essence of heavenly venerates and convert it into their own power to increase their cultivation level. Thus, even after Ling Han absorbed their lord's true power, this energy would still return to them once he was killed. Of course, there would definitely be some losses, but to be able to get rid of a traitor with heaven-defying abilities like Ling Han, this small price was naturally worth it. They weren't in a hurry. Currently, Ling Han was only drunk, but he would soon fall into a deep slumber. That would make it even easier for them to get rid of him. The 7 of them all looked at Ling Han with smirks on their faces, anticipating to see Ling Han reveal an expression of anger, defiant but helpless. This would make all the pores on their bodies to be opened. However, Ling Han's next action caused the corners of their mouths to twitch. This was because he reached out and snatched the wine pot, directly gulping it down in large mouthfuls. Fuck, do you think you're not dying fast enough? Mengdong and the others were speechless. How could there be such a person? Was he out of his mind? Or was it a vicious cycle where he would get drunk to death first? Snatch it! Mengdong was the first to react. Ling Han had already drunk enough wine, and it would be a waste to let him drink any more. This was because even if they could refine Ling Han's life essence, there was still a problem with the conversion rate, and there would be losses. The 7 of them hurriedly moved to snatch the wine pot. However, even though Ling Han was drunk, shaking his head and looking as if he could collapse at any moment, he managed to avoid all the attacks of the 7 people just by swaying back and forth like this while still gulping down large mouthfuls of wine. Meng Dong and the others were so anxious that their eyes turned red. Every time Ling Han drank an extra mouthful, how great of a waste would that be? Previously, they hadn't felt heartache, because that was the price they had to pay in order to take Ling Han down. However, that wasn't the case now. Put down the wine pot. Meng Dong roared as he continued to attack. Ling Han said slurringly, "Why should I put it down? Who do you think you are? I just want to drink to my heart's content." You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.